Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic Friday, that you've had a safe and wonderful last couple of days, and that I hope that you and your family and your friends are safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that has happened over the last 48 hours since our last report on Wednesday, and as you may be able to tell from all of the different points on the map, there's just a ton of different stuff going on, both geopolitically and of course with other issues going on throughout the world. Now, there's a ton of stuff happening, but that usually means in general that a lot of people are suffering. In fact, as we were talking today, according to the World Food Program's director, 345 million people, which is actually more than the population of the entirety of the United States, are currently suffering from food and water insecurities throughout the world. That's up from 80 million people not but a year ago. The World Food Program, of course, is also struggling, as 50% of what they receive is food-wise is actually from Ukraine and Ukrainian agricultural products. Now, that has been eased a little bit with the grain corridor, but there's still a ton of people throughout the world that are in general suffering. And I can bet you that if you're watching this right now, I can almost guarantee you're probably much better off than most of those people are right now. So, with that, the whole point of this project is to give back. It is to help people throughout the entirety of the world with the very same crises that we talk about on the news every single day. The point of the news is to bring awareness and let you is to inform you so you can make well-informed decisions about the world and the reality that you find yourself in every single day. Now, something very clear, we do have a bias for Ukraine. That's based off of a lot of information which we have come through, which as of here you see roughly 10 to 25%. Other than that, we do try to stay relatively apolitical and unbiased in everything else we're doing. But I please implore you, with the suffering of so many people throughout the world, please do go into the description below and help us be the news that gives back, as that is the point of the project. And if you, when you go into the video description, you'll see that there is a ton of different organizations down there that span all sorts of things. So if you are wanting to support the war effort in Ukraine, or if you're trying to support humanitarian efforts in Ukraine or elsewhere, or surrounding that area with the whole Ukraine crisis ongoing right now with the war, or if you want to help people in Africa, such as the Tigray region of Ethiopia, where 90% of people require humanitarian aid, or Somalia, where 90% of the country is dry due to the worst drought in 40 years. Please be sure to go and check out all of them. 80% or more of the proceeds all of these organizations do receive from your donations go directly to helping their programs. They go directly to helping people through their programs, and that is verifiable through their actual tax records, which we go through during our verification process. So please, I implore you to check them all out equally. They're all wonderful organizations, fundraisers, and drives, and to give as much support to them as physically possible. And with that, we get ready to move into the news, and feel free to ask questions. If you're here watching live with us tonight, I am watching the live chat as well throughout the entire duration of the stream, and I will address comments and different questions that you field to me on the stream if you're here with us tonight and are able to ask them, and I'll answer them to the very best of my ability. Now, to give you a little bit of a background on myself, should you be new to the channel, so I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I served as an 0352 anti-tank missileman and a corporal in the United States Marine Corps. And so my first deployment was between October of 2017 and March of 2018, where I went and spent 4.5 months in the country of Syria, where I conducted anti-armor operations, convoy escorts, as well as deterrence missions in the fight against the Islamic State, as well as assisting our Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces partners. I also spent about a month and a half in Kuwait during transit during that deployment. My second deployment I spent between October of 2019 and March of 2020, where I served as the Javelin team leader for the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait. I then also responded to the Baghdad Embassy complex during the attack on the Baghdad Embassy on New Year's of 2020. I was one of the 100 Marines that went there, and I oversaw anti-armor operations for the entire Baghdad Embassy compound. And then after that, I went to Saudi Arabia, where I trained Saudi Arabian Marines deploying to Yemen to fight against the Houthi rebels there that had toppled the Yemeni government. And they went there, and of course, now that it's at peace, wonderfully. So we're very happy to see that. But yeah, so that was basically my my background there to my experience. My subject matter expertise lie in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. I am fully fluent. Of course, my primary weapon systems are the FGM-148 Javelin anti-tank missile system, as well as the M41A7 Sabre system, which is a tow missile launcher. I'm also a fully cross-trained machine gunner. I have fired every single machine gun in the Marine Corps arsenal. And I have also a fully cross-trained rifleman, of course, firing every single rifle in the Marine Corps arsenal. For the basic infantrymen, I've also fired every sniper rifle there is with familiarization fires. I have been a partially cross-trained radio operator. I am a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Qualified Marine with medical expertise. And so I can, with anything in regards to that, I am more than capable of being able to answer your questions with very good confidence. Outside of that, I try to maintain a very well-rounded knowledge base. I am very interested in history, geopolitics, of course, and just investigative journalism in general. And so I can answer a lot of questions that you may have from those kinds of perspectives as well. However, I may not be as confident in those answers too. So I always implore you, subject matter expert or not, that you always do your own research as a viewer, as it's imperative that if you find something of interest in here, that you go through and you are going and doing your own research and diving into it, because don't believe everything you necessarily hear on the internet. I mean, it's just kind of internet rule number one. Well, with that, we get immediately here into the news, where, of course, we start off with our special report coming out of the country of Ukraine, where there's been a war ongoing since the February 24th of this year, when Russia invaded the country. Now, we jump over here, and we actually are going to start off, instead of in Kyiv, over here in Lviv, where we're seeing that there are bulletproof vests for children. So Maxim Plikov of Lviv Defense Cluster is the largest body armor manufacturer in Ukraine, described how pediatric bulletproof vests are being made. And this is coming from Anton Gerashenko's official Twitter. Take a look.
Виробляє бронежилети. І навіть у страшному сні я не мог представити, що колись буду виготовляти бронежилети для дітей. Сьогодні ми єдина організація в Україні, яка виготовляє бронежилети для дітей. По-перше, стало питання, з якого матеріалу це можна виготовити. Ким бачу перед нас, це матеріал, з якого використовуються м'які бронежилети. Фактично, в мене в руках 28 прошарків цього поліетилену. Від така товщина. Надлегка вага. Він дуже гнучкий. Він не має проблем з намоканням, з дією ультрафіолету, з теплом, ні з чим. Модель жилету, яка передбачає можливість дитину одягнути, негайно застебнути. Тут два шари балістичного захисту. Що вона знаходиться в цій зоні? В цій зоні знаходиться серце. Тому цей жилет у зоні серця має дворівневий перехресний захист.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So that's coming from DW, which is a German news agency out of there. And I actually find them pretty interesting to listen to. I actually listen to them during my lunch hours when I'm at work. But yeah, very interesting. It's kind of, and as JL said, this is unreal to listen to. A moment has come where we need to care about making vests for children. And it's true. In fact, we actually have the child casualty update, which we'll be getting to here when we get over into Kyiv. But the fact of the matter is that, unfortunately, war is not discriminate in who it attacks, especially when it comes to the Russian forces. And what we see is that a ton of children have been killed, a ton of children have been injured. Many are missing at this point. Over 200 are reported missing there at the front line. And over 8,000 of them have actually been deported. But there is just a ton. It affects everybody, especially with these scorched earth style tactics that we're seeing from the Russian forces, which really is just leveling entire cities. Of course, Arch Instinct says, which main battle tank is superior, the K2 Black Panther or the Leopard 2? Ooh. Very interesting question. Not that it really pertains to the news much, but that's a really hard one. K2 Black Panther, for those that don't know, is developed by, I believe, South Korea. It's one of the newest tanks models that can be exported at this point, and it's also one of their newest domestic variants as well. The Leopard 2 is the main battle tank of Germany, which is replacing their aging Leopard 1 fleet, which most of their fleet for the Leopard 1 is actually going to Poland, which is going to replace their Soviet-era tanks that they have been using, as well as other countries. But the... I would say that the Leopard 2 is the more superior. And that's because it has a good ratio of electronics versus basic equipment, like very basic analog systems. That's the only reason. An over-reliance on electronics, I think, is a detriment more than it is an advantage, because electronics break constantly. If you know anything about military-grade equipment, it's really not that great. It means it will break. It's guaranteed to break. Military-grade is the best, means it met the standard at the lowest price. That is what military-grade is. So that's why I never listen to that kind of advertising. So even though it's military-grade electronics, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. I think the Leopard 2, and I also think because the Leopard 2 definitely has a lot more testing done to it and probably has a little bit more rigorous, it's got that experience behind it. The K2 may end up being better in the long term as things develop and as upgrade packages go on to that, but there's just not enough known about the K2 right now. It hasn't been around long enough to see where its faults lie yet, and that could be a very big hindrance. Just like everyone before the war was thinking T-90s were the most one of the most dangerous tanks you could come up against, and the T-90's a joke. So very similar kind of mindset. I really haven't seen the K2 do enough to really be sold on it completely. So I'm definitely going with the Leopard 2 on that one. But that's not the best neither of those are the best main battle tanks out there. So anyway, moving into Kyiv and back with the actual news here. We see that the World Health Organization here in Ukraine has confirmed hospital strikes. So they bring out this confirmation every once in a while. The World Health Organization, or WHO, within Ukraine has confirmed at least 623 attacks on healthcare in Ukraine between February the 24th and October the 10th. These caused 100 deaths and 129 injuries thus far. Medical personnel, facilities, and equipment are specifically protected under the Geneva Conventions. And as we have seen with videos with our own eyes, here on this channel, we've seen that there is no really discriminate fires when it comes from the Russians, and to the point where it's even questionable if they are purposefully targeting medical facilities. We've also seen ammunition in the back of medical vehicles too, which also breaks the Geneva Convention, as those vehicles marked with medical insignia are not meant to be carrying ammunition or weaponry outside of those immediately taken off of casualties within those vehicles and self-defense weapons. That is it. So this is talking about damage caused to these hospitals, attacks that have hit these hospitals. And of course, they say hashtag not a target, which is should be very obvious, but it is true. It breaks the Geneva Convention to target and or damage and destroy these kind of hospitals. Or any hospital. Medical personnel, military or civilian, are not targets unless they're acting as combatants. Mark Hamill sent 500 drones to Ukraine. For those that don't know, Mark Hamill is better known for his role as Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars franchise. So he was the original main character for the Star Wars series with episodes 4, 5, and 6. And then he went on, of course, going through and doing 7, 8, and 9 as well. But he partnered some time ago, actually, with talking with President Zelensky himself. He partnered with United 24 as a United 24 ambassador for Ukraine, and so far he's collected and sent 500 drones to Ukraine to be used by Ukrainian services, Ukrainian armed services, and as well as Ukrainian emergency services for rescue and recovery efforts, as well as military applications as well. So that's pretty awesome to see. And I mean, what more could you want? It's Mark Hamill being another awesome individual, another awesome human being, as we have seen Mark Hamill be consistently throughout his career and lifetime. He's used his notoriety for overall good, which is just fantastic to see. A 6-year-old here asked Russians to release his mom. 6-year-old Yehor is asked the Russian president to let his mom back to Ukraine. Yehor's dad was killed defending Mariupol, and his mom is in Russian captivity. The family lived in Mariupol before the invasion. Yehor is staying with his grandparents and is currently going to school here in one of the much more safer areas of the country.
Верни мою маму. Почалася війна, і ми теж переїхали опять сюди.
– 23 квітня він попав під авіабомбу. Йому зробили операцію, а так на другий день йому повинні були вивезти, але не встигли, він помер 26 квітня, він помер. Я так йому розказую, треба підготувати, що він нас оберігає. Він дивиться, як ти учишся. Ми хочемо, щоб невістку, на обмін, щоб нам невістку додому переправили, бо кожен день, кожну годину він просинається, питає, де мама. І ми дуже хочемо, щоб і президент, хто там всі, щоб нам сина переправили додому. Ось у 26-го буде півроку, а ми кожен день чекаємо.
Кажуть, що його нема, а я жду. Я його кожен день бачу по дорозі. І в домі, і за столом. Скрізь я його бачу, бо я його не ховав. От в чому діло.
Це
So once again, that is Yehor, who is 6 years old, just started first grade, and his father was killed in the Battle of Mariupol, and his mother is still in Russian captivity. Zelensky stated during an interview with Canadian CTV that Ukraine and himself did not authorize the bombing of the Kerch Bridge, which is a very major development. Many people assume it is Ukraine who conducted this blast, and as many of you know, the Kerch Bridge, also known as the Crimean Bridge, was what really instigated the large-scale ballistic missile attacks and drone attacks across the country of Ukraine, striking critical civilian infrastructure because they saw it as a terror attack. And many people, from a lot of pro-Russian sources, are claiming that such an attack was a terror attack. 3 civilians were killed as collateral damage during that attack, but it severely impeded the Kerch Bridge for some time while repairs are currently being made. But anyway, President Zelensky stated that he did not authorize, it was not an ordered attack by Ukrainian forces on that bridge. If you want to have more information regarding that interview, Kiev Independent also covered that as well. Please feel free, you can go and check that out. In fact, our map itself is actually on our website, which is in the description. You can go and check out all these maps and click through all of these points yourselves as well if you want to check out all of that. Now, with that ballistic vests, those bulletproof vests for children, I call them flak jackets, but with those flaks for children comes the child casualty update, which we get pretty much every single day from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. As of today, quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 429 Ukrainian children have died, 817 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region, end quote. And so that is what we are seeing. Quite a few child casualties throughout the duration of this war, and that number is steadily climbing. It increased by at least one child, which was killed since yesterday, which I saw when we were researching as well. And that number is continually climbing day by day, hour by hour, as casualties continue to mount in this war. Russia continues to be firing indiscriminately. They are continuing to use unguided rocket systems that use mass volleys in really meant for area denial and area suppression targets. And they're using them against highly populated areas, causing immense amount of collateral damage with no real limitations. And this has even been outlined by the United Nations. And this doesn't even go into the much more detailed war crimes accounts that we have coming just from the United Nations preliminary investigation here, which has been pretty mind-boggling. And if you remember from our last episode, it was very tough to read. Liberations do continue with a little bit of uplifting news coming out of Kyiv, and that's because, quote, as of October the 21st, the armed forces of Ukraine have liberated 88 settlements in the Kherson region, 43 settlements in the Donetsk region, and 551 settlements in the Kharkiv region from Russian occupiers, end quote. And that's coming from Krylo Tomashenko, who's the deputy head of the President's Office of Ukraine. And that begins to bring us into the Kharkiv area, and we move into the Donbass and the Southern Front as we get into the meat and potatoes of the war, where the fighting is actually ongoing. And we start off in Kharkiv, where we get an update from Oleg Subinov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration, and he stated, quote, since in the last 24 hours, Russian occupiers shelled Kharkiv and the Kharkiv region. 12 people were injured, and a local industrial infrastructure facility and residential buildings were damaged. Once again, while there are valid military targets in some capacities that are being targeted, it's very indiscriminate in their attacks, and we see a lot of these shells landing in amongst civilian infrastructure. Up here to the north in the recently liberated border town of Vovchansk, we see that 10 Ukrainian police officers are being charged with treason. 10 Ukrainian police officers were arrested and charged with treason, according to the UA Ministry of Internal Affairs. The police officers reportedly collaborated and assisted Russian occupational forces in their brutal crackdowns on civilian population of Vovchansk after Vovchansk was occupied during the initial invasion. So these police officers immediately resumed their duties under the Russians and implemented Russian policies and brutal suppression and crackdown, including enforced disappearances within the city of Vovchansk, which are currently being investigated, and they have been arrested and charged with treason as a result. If you remember from many of our earlier reports, just the amount of atrocities that were committed as the liberation of the Kharkiv Oblast does continue, it seems that we continue to find mass executions, torture, and torture chambers, and it's just an absolutely terrifying situation to think of. And these police officers did apparently, according to the Ukrainians, participate in such activities in support of the Russians there in Vovchansk. Speaking of enforced disappearances and executions, we get to Liman, which is here in the Donetsk Oblast. Body recovery does continue. As of, quote, as of October the 20th, 146 dead bodies of Ukrainian citizens killed by Russian occupiers have been found in Liman in the Donetsk region. That's coming from the press service of the Donetsk Regional Police. So that does continue. In Kramatorsk, there's a little bit of a cute note here. So a lot of people, when they fled these regions, they had to flee immediately. And unfortunately, that does mean that they left part of their family behind, most notably pets. A lot of these pets have been on their own for the duration of this war as their families fled these areas and headed to, to become refugees in other nations or internally displaced people. These pets were left behind. Couldn't be taken with them, not easily. And as a result, Nate Mook from the World Central Kitchen, which is actually one of the organizations we support, reported that dogs lined up to eat at a pet feeding station, which was recently installed within the city of Kramatorsk. It's a little feeding station that they have installed, and there they all are, nicely queued in line to wait their turn to come and eat. It's adorable, but it's extremely disheartening too. To think all these pets that were just left behind because of the circumstances. Like, I consider my pets, like Tally over there, my wonderful co-host who has fallen asleep. I consider like that being part of my family. So I can't imagine just how considering how many pets have been left. We also get the daily Donetsk update, which comes from Pavel Krylenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, and he said for yesterday. So his reports, by the way, they come out at 8 a.m. the next day, covering the previous 24 hours. So yesterday will cover the 19th, today's covers the 20th, tomorrow's will cover the 21st. So that's kind of how he does it. 8 a.m. every morning he reports on the day before. So from yesterday, quote, on October the 19th, the number of victims of Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 13 killed, 5 injured. And we do have that update here. And he does keep running tally. We also see, quote, on October the 20th, the number of Russian victims in Donetsk region increased by 11 dead and 1 wounded. It is currently impossible to establish the exact number of victims in Mariupol and Volnovakha. Every war criminal will be punished. So far, according to his daily tally, which came out at 8 a.m. local time as of today, we're seeing that so far killed, we have 1,070 Ukrainian citizens have been killed, not including Mariupol or Volnovakha. And we also have 2,441 Ukrainian citizens which have been injured regarding Russian aggression here in Ukraine since February the 24th. This doesn't even include the 8 years of fighting prior with Russian-backed separatist forces within this region. Bakhmut is where some of the heaviest fighting is currently taking place. It's taking place between the armed forces of Ukraine, which are currently defending the region, and against the very notorious Wagner Group, which I have a personal hatred for. The Wagner Group is a private military corporation that is run by an individual named Prigozhin. Prigozhin, also known as Putin's chef, is one of Putin's inner circle. It was founded in 2014 as a mercenary corporation. It's really an extension of the Russian army. These are individuals who originally had army contracts with the Russian Federation that once their contract was up, they were offered a contract to be paid much better by Prigozhin's forces, which is the Wagner Private Military Corporation. Their operations include in areas such as Syria, where they actually engaged American forces at the Conoco fuel plant during the Battle of Kasham on February the 7th, 2018, and they were wiped out. 300 of them were killed and wounded. We also saw them in Mali, not just but a few months ago, which we reported here, where French forces, shortly after withdrawing from their bases, caught on drone camera footage, using one of their drones still in the region, Wagner forces killing local civilians and piling them into a mass grave in the French complex, to then attempt to state that the French had been killing local populations. These individuals are used for clandestine operations where the Russians would prefer to have plausible deniability. Due to manpower issues here on the front lines, the Wagner Group has been used in an operational capacity and has been basically supplementing Russian forces within this region. Bakhmut is where they've mostly congregated, and that's where we see most of the Wagner Group currently fighting at this point. This is their sector of the front line, and the fighting has turned very bitter. Now, there has been very little gain for the Russians, and there's also been very little loss, as most of the pressure right now is in the Kherson Oblast, while Ukrainian troops up here are currently defending the line. But Bakhmut has been shelled mercilessly for several months now. Almost no building inside of this village is unmolested by Russian artillery fire. We continue to see that as the utter devastation continues here in Bakhmut. And civilians are still living there and are still suffering. In fact, in this next few videos, you'll see several of those that have been wounded in the immediate response of those Ukrainian forces to the wounded at these locations. Take a look.
Що там? Куди прилетіло? Сюди? Я бачу. Коли прильот був?
Минут 15 назад, 10 даже.
Що летіло?
Кассета.
Касета?
падает, да.
Тихо! Куда тільки рука? Тихо, терпіть. Мені треба добратися до вашої ручки, добратися треба. Турнікет не налажували, бачу ніяк.
Ничего нету, там с тобой ничего нету.
Касети, да, хуя?
Да, кассеты упали, блядь. И попала одна в машину и по стеклу.
Тут стояли люди.
Да.
Як вас звати? Віка, скільки вам рочків? О, ти яка молодесенька. Потерпіть трошки, потерпіть, все буде добре. Все буде добре, все буде добре, все буде добре. Надо їй допомогти. Акуратненько приподняти ручку. Там, де перелом, приподнімай. Терпи, сонце, терпи. Зараз буду тебе обезболювати, ще трошечки. Все, хай лежить, у неї нічого більш немає. Подивіться її руки, ноги, живіт розкритий. Я до тяжких. У неї, все, вона стабільна. Підходь. Що тут? Розділи їх? За бандажем? Це його, блядь, сил. Куди йому прилетіло? Це хтось замотало його? Все, підніме, так? Все, став. Так. Не задохнешся. Так, я йому спину нічого там нема, крови трошки. Давайте цього. Давайте цього. Ну тут по тяжкості того першого треба забирати. Ой, тоді ще цього розділимо. Тут мені ноутбук приніс ноутбук? Давай я піду дівчинку обезболю. Алергія на медичні препарати є? Отходь, одійдіть мені. Я бачу, ну тут нічого страшного немає, тут просто зашли і все. Нема алергії? Все, я обезболю її на обухін. Ви чули, якщо я напишу на ній, ви скажете.
Now, for someone that may not understand why some of them have the reactions the way they do, so the reason why he arrives and she's covered like that, and when she's kind of not very responsive. She is responsive. She's not very responsive. Is because when you get injured, something that you always have to account for is not just the physical injury itself, but your body's reaction to it. This is normal reaction is called going into shock. And something you do is you keep them warm is something you can do to keep them from going into shock or for preventing the effects of shock, because shock will actually kill you. It's your body's reaction to the trauma that you've received, light or not light. And it looks like that most of these individuals were peppered with shrapnel. What he was checking out there at the end is making sure there was apparently one piece of shrapnel that had gone through. It was very hard to spot because of her coat, but it had gone through the top of her coat, and it looked like it had embedded itself either into her neck or into her head, as well as other shrapnel and other parts, mostly the sides and into the abdomen. He applied a pressure bandage onto the one individual, which is why he kept trying to get underneath it, because he's trying to secure that pressure bandage. But yeah, shock is very deadly, if it's not something you're paying attention to. So that's why she's kind of seems a little. I mean, obviously she's kind of out of it because she just got peppered with shrapnel, but that's kind of it's not because she's not injured, but because she's in shock. And something that we see here is you can see really the amount of destruction here. So this is an apartment complex here in Bakhmut that has been completely destroyed. That's an apartment building. Every single building in this city looks like Bakhmut. It looks like this one. Every single building in Bakhmut looks like that. It is absolutely destroyed. It is peppered with shrapnel. Every window is blown out. Everything is hanging off. Parts of the building have collapsed from where grad rockets have impacted or buzzed straight through the window and exploded on the interior of the building. Mortar rounds, artillery guns, tube artillery, rocket artillery, mostly grad systems, Oglo rockets. It's an absolutely terrible situation. Bakhmut likely will have to be almost completely rebuilt from the ground up once this war is over. Bakhmut has suffered tremendously under Russian artillery barrages and continues to do so every single day, multiple times a day. Something I was kind of excited to talk about today, as I'm sure you can guess why. Toe on the wire. So this video reportedly is the first images of the use of the M41A7 Sabre system successfully engaging Russian armor in Ukraine. Now, it's a TOW missile launcher, which stands for TOW, is a type of missile. In fact, I got a missile tube right there. That's a TOW-2 Bravo. Sorry, TOW-2 Alpha. And that stands for Tubular Launch Optically Tracked Wired Command Link Guided Missile. So it's a type of missile system. It's guided by the individual. They have very long, extensive ranges. In fact, some systems, some missiles that go with this, because these can fire up to 8 different types of missiles at this point. Some of them actually, the ranges so far, it's actually outranges the max effective range of main tank guns for the Russian Federation. Which is about 4 kilometers, to give you an idea about how far this thing could reach out and touch somebody. So it's almost impossible to completely identify this as being from Ukraine. So this is being reportedly the first image of a successful use of this in Ukraine. We have seen it being used before, but we didn't see the actual impact. This actually features something that we even use more often than not during training than in combat, but this is something where the vehicle commander, who sits in the passenger front seat of the vehicle, has actually like a tablet in his hands that is linked to what's called the ITAS, the Improved Target Acquisition Subsystem of the system, which is the optic. It's actually, for the Marine Corps, it's if I don't stand corrected here, when I went through school, I was told it was the second most powerful optic in the Marine Corps, to give you an idea how accurate this thing is, how powerful this giant camera is. It allows for the vehicle commander, or VC, to coordinate fires. He can tell the gunner what he wants to engage, or what he wants him to engage, and he can also just allow to see what the gunner is doing, because it's an exact hookup. It shows exactly what the gunner is doing in real time on his system. So it's really cool. This is them. It's engaging. It would appear it's engaging a BMP. Take a look. So you can see the gunner's lining up his shot. He's using a TOW-2 Bravo. And he's firing it there. And it makes a direct impact on target. And we do get a catastrophic kill of that weapon system. Now he's using what's called line of sight. And for those, so like I was saying earlier, this was my job. The TOW system is one that I'm very, very familiar with, obviously. But whenever I talk about this stuff, always remember that I do not come unprepared, because I have this, which is my original tank, my original handbook. This is what they taught us with when I went through school, and you can see this is my anti-tank missileman handout with, of course, the TOW and TOW-2 Bravo and the Javelin Fire Forget emblems. But also this, which I'm sure you probably may or may not have ever seen. This is the actual maintenance and operators booklet for, this is the technical manual for the M41A7 Saber system, which has everything you could possibly want. This one. Now, I can't show too much of this on camera because this is actually for official use only. It came out in 2014. But, regardless, if you have any questions and I don't know, I can always find them. And I have this for most of the weapon systems that the United States Marine Corps is going to actually be using. So, if you ever have questions, I think I even have a 60mm mortar book in that, and also squad level tactics. But, yeah, so this is the view of the TOW system. Now, something I am impressed to see, I have to wonder what range he's engaging this at. So I'm actually going to guess here and say 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. So he's engaging a target at about 2,700 meters is about how far he's engaging a target. So what you see when he fires, so he lines up the target, and what you see, it's actually pretty interesting. So so the TOW missile, it sits on your shoulder essentially when you're firing it. Now it's hooked into the system, so but your shoulder is actually underneath the system, and your head's resting against it essentially. And what we see is he fires it, and this is called, so this is, what ends up happening is when you're firing a TOW missile, it blurs out the screen from the backblast of the missile and from when it's actually exiting the tube. As you can see here, it's called a whiteout on the screen of whatever you're shooting on your system. And it lasts about 4 seconds. Now, if a target's within about 1,000 meters of you, within 1 kilometer, you actually want to use, these things have track gates, which is exactly how you lock on to which is how long, or what you use to lock onto a target with a Javelin missile. Now, this thing has track gates, but they're only temporary. They only last 4 seconds. So he doesn't apply the track gates because he's not within 1,000 meters. Now, when you see he fires, he has to correct his missile because he has done what's called a gunner's jolt. When the missile goes off, you kind of tense up. It's kind of terrifying because these things also have a failure called a launch motor rupture, in which case the launch motor, which kicks this thing out of its tube and sends it on its way, if it gets too much humidity inside the tube itself, will actually detonate in your face. But this thing is going off right in your face when you're firing this. So he causes what's called a gunner's jolt, which actually puts it off target. It's just because your body tensed it up, and that 4,000 meters of very minute movement on that system is going to really adjust that flight. But he has enough time. The whiteout clears. He can adjust his target as the missile's going down range. And for about every 4 seconds, that missile has traveled 1,000 meters. You can see he has enough time. It travels just under 12 seconds. It travels about 11 seconds. And so what you ended up seeing is that ended up impacting. Now, he chose to engage this with line of sight, which means that this TOW Bravo did direct impact this target. The TOW Bravo has 2 different engagement types. It has the first engagement type, which is line of sight. Line of sight means it will put it onto its target with a direct impact. And then the other one, so the other missile or type, the other shooting type, I should say, that you can set it to, and it's usually the default, is actually a flyover shoot down effect. So if you've ever seen a video of, there's a really great video of a TOW Bravo hitting a T-72 that's fully laden during training, and it flies over the target and then it blows up, which sends the turret flying like 200 meters in the air. The way that works is it detects the target underneath the missile, because the missile flies a couple meters above the target itself, like above your crosshair, and actually it detects the target underneath it and fires an explosive charge down and into the turret, which is the weakest part of a tank, and it then detonates it. So pretty crazy, and pretty awesome, but that's how this thing works. So pretty cool though, and I'm absolutely fascinated with how these things work. They're just a really cool weapon system. They're just a really, really cool weapon system. And, of course, it's mounted on a Humvee, but really cool. I highly encourage, if you think that this is... if you think that this kind of stuff is very interesting, I highly encourage you to go check out like how these weapon systems actually work, because it's mind-boggling. We move over here and continue on with the actual news here, instead of just my small interest here with the actual weapon systems being employed here. And what we end up seeing is a couple of different things going on. This is right here on the front lines in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and these are where the Red Cross of Ukraine and the International Committee of the Red Cross are actually coming in. The International Committee of the Red Cross delivered aid, including food, water, and hygiene parcels over here to Preobrazhenka, Brazenka, which, sorry for my pronunciation, I cannot pronounce. I barely speak English, let alone Ukrainian, so I really apologize for butchering things. But these parcels consist of will assist about 1,000 people, and each of these parcels will last about a month. Nuclear says, I missed a private Conscriptovich quote. That's unfortunate. I'll look for it while we're watching.
Today the ICRC is in Preobrazhenka, a district of about 4,000 people located a few kilometers from the front line. The population here has been suffering for almost 7 months from continuous hostilities. Based on our assessment, today we are here with food and hygiene parcels for about 1,000 people that will last for about a month. We continue to operate in near frontline proximities.
I see that Conscriptovich got promoted again. Damn. Lieutenant General? He really made it all the way to Lieutenant General from Lieutenant? That's impressive, Nuke. That's impressive. You must not be doing so well in KHERSON, huh? The International Committee of the Red Cross, specifically the Ukrainian Red Cross, did evacuate civilians while under fire. In fact, the village here of Orkiv was actually under sustained bombardment for 7 continuous hours while these missions were ongoing. And Orkiv, the Ukrainian Red Cross went through here, and they evacuated individuals from this village that were unable to evacuate themselves, mostly the elderly, disabled, and wounded, and also providing first aid over here. So take a look. So these are photos coming from the Ukrainian Red Cross on their official Twitter page of them conducting these evacuations. Once again, it's mostly elderly residents, individuals that can't evacuate on their own. It's people that can't leave because they physically just aren't able to. Not necessarily because they don't want to, just because they can't. So the International Committee of the Red Cross is still conducting a lot of good work there on the front lines and continuing to provide first aid, as we saw with the missile strikes in many of these major cities, and as well as, you know, trying to provide the ability to to evacuate to safety. We actually see where some of these strikes were taking place. This is from Shuvaka, which is here in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast to the north. And what we see is that a school was damaged during Russian shelling. A local school here in the city was damaged by Russian shelling. It's because Russian forces continue to mercilessly pound Ukrainian villages and leveling them to the ground with, once again, these indiscriminate bombardments. And once again, this is a protected site. Under Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, which is adopted in 1977, the mere planning of these types of indiscriminate attacks constitute a war crime. The carrying out of such orders to conduct indiscriminate attacks is also a war crime. Furthermore, under the 1949 Geneva Conventions, the damage of critical civilian infrastructure such as schools without the building being used, knowingly being used and observed as a military is not being observed of being used for military purposes, it is not a military target. It's still considered civilian infrastructure. Once military forces move into a residence or into a school or what have you, it is considered a military target. The one major exception we really see is out of hospitals. Technically, they do lose that moniker, but still maintain the moniker of being protected because of a medical situation. This is both medical and civilian medical infrastructure are covered. However, using it for military purposes, specifically meaning the usage of, like, using it as a military headquarters, using it to store ammunition, using it as a firing point, that does mean it does lose its actual military, or it then loses its protections. But we see this coming. This is all coming from the Verkhovna Rada, which is actually the Ukrainian parliament. So this is their official Twitter. You can see the impacts there around this school, absolutely busted out the windows. You can see the roof has partially collapsed from a direct strike there on the rooftop. Craters being left in and around the school area. You can see it hit, coming through, hit the wall, busted out the complete backside of this wall, destroyed their little tire set that they had there, little playground area there. But appears very few direct hits, but direct hits nonetheless, and those landing nearby. And once again, these are schools. Ukrainian children, nearly 6 million Ukrainian children should be in school right now, and there's a good chunk of them that simply can't because their schools are destroyed or they are not in an area where that school is capable of being used as a school anymore. Coming out of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, we see Zaporizhzhia was hit once again with Russian shelling. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at Zaporizhzhia on the morning of October the 24th. 9 Ukrainian citizens were injured. 8 injured victims were hospitalized. A local high-rise building and an educational establishment were damaged. That's coming from Andrei Kurtiev, who is the secretary of the city council of Zaporizhia. And we got this coming from Amin Dezhapar, who is a member of the Verkhovna Rada, who posted this video, which we used as our thumbnail tonight. So this is the image. That's one of those direct impacts from a Russian missile that ended up hitting here and punching straight through that building. North, we jump into Dnipro, well, just outside Dnipro, where energy infrastructure was hit. While there were no casualties, energy infrastructure is once again targeted and severely damaged by Russian missile strikes in Kryvyi Voriska, which is here in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. 21st, not 24th. You can see those strike impacts there. You can see, while it is blurred out, you can see the smokestacks coming up there in the background from this power plant. And what's left of those missiles may have been a caliber. This is coming from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Did I misspeak and say 24th? I may have, but it is October the 21st when it hit Zaporizhia. And that begins to bring us into today's hot topic, which is KHERSON. KHERSON is under a media blackout. So we have bits and pieces of information that are coming in, but none that we can really share a whole lot with. But we can kind of describe the situation as far as our understanding of it now. And that is that the Russians appear to begin to be retreating from the Kherson Oblast north of the Dnipro River. They consider it the left bank of the Dnipro River. For those that don't know, maps are read in cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. So the north bank of the Dnipro River here. This is where Ukrainian forces have been mounting a ton of pressure onto Russian forces within this region, and they are slowly squeezing them. If you keep in mind, as we had reported about a week, almost 2 weeks ago at this point, where Ukrainian forces actually rolled the entire Russian right flank, and this is causing Russian forces to conduct what can be best described as a tactical withdrawal at this point. But both the major crossings across the Dnipro River have been subsequently destroyed. In fact, there are unconfirmed reports tonight of Ukraine conducting HIMARS rocket strikes on and around the Antonovsky Bridge around the Kherson area, which does have a ferry there. And so we're seeing a ton of activity here in the Kherson region, but not a lot coming from the front lines because of that media blackout. Now, Putin signed a decree saying that the annexed territories, the territories under Russian occupation are currently under martial law. Part of this now allows for confiscation, looting, things basically being completely legalized for Russian forces from a paperwork perspective for the Russians. This also allows for a harsher crackdown on partisan activities, resistance activities from the Ukrainian forces, which have been extremely effective here within this region. Oh, yes, the "this is fine" meme. Yes, very. Thank you, Nuclear. Yeah, that's about the best way to describe it. This is fine, the whole place being on fire. Russian forces appear to be withdrawing. There are rumors coming from locals in the area, at least local sources from the area, that are saying that Russian forces are apparently starting to bring their equipment back across the Dnipro to the south side. And so we're seeing a lot of this kind of happening. But as Ukrainian forces are pushing through, they are documenting war crimes. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have committed 156 war crimes against Ukraine and its citizens in the Kherson region. That's coming from Alexei Surehev, who is the head of the Organization of Analytical Support and Operational Response Department of the National Police of Ukraine. Wow, that guy needs an acronym. That guy's title needs an acronym. Yeah, you need an acronym, my friend. That's a long title. But yes, 156 war crimes. Keep in mind, this is just the information coming out now. There's a ton of stuff that even in the liberated areas still is yet to be found. And that's coming from places like Kharkiv and Donetsk and Luhansk, places that have liberated territory, because situation, just the focus isn't on that yet. The situation may not allow for it, and there's so much to comb through, so many people that are missing. Bootcamp 40 asked, are they using the rail lines on the Kerch Bridge? I see they only have one car lane open. Now, the Kerch Bridge has at least 2 different rail lines and 2 different car lanes. Right now, it's a one-way on their road bridge here, but at least this right track was severely damaged as a result of that destruction. It's very warped tracks. The flames that are coming off of these fuel tankers warp the tracks as well, and cause significant damage to at least that right side, that right track that you're seeing there on this Kerch Bridge. But at least one rail line, I believe, is open. From the photos and videos we're seeing, at least one rail line is open. However, the effectiveness of said rail line is questionable. At this point, it's operational degraded. I wouldn't say destroyed as initially thought, but it is severely degraded. The one lane that is open was actually closed until further notice. Ongoing repairs. There's structural issues with that section of the roadway, and one of the rail sections is open, and that's coming from multiple different assessments. The Department of Defense for the United States, that's coming from Ukraine, that's also coming from the Russian sources. So kind of a mixture of both. It would appear that at least the one rail track is open. Now, it's not great to only have one lane open. Keep in mind, this is the main supply route into the south. This is the MSR. There is no other real way. And the only other way to do it is to ferry stuff across, which limits your capability, similar to them having to ferry stuff across the Dnipro River, which really limits their capacity for resupply, any kind of speed when time is a factor, which it often is in the battlefield. The battlefield is not measured in days or months or hours. It's measured in seconds. Every second counts on a battlefield, and the Russians I don't think they fully understand or comprehend that, because they do not act in a very timely manner. They seem to mission has priority as opposed to time being a factor, time being priority in some case, or in many cases, and that seems to be really to their detriment, because time is a factor on the battlefield, and these guys are not achieving any of those types of objectives whatsoever. They're not really achieving any objectives but losing, but that's just kind of what we're seeing. So I hope that answers your question there, Bukem. I really do. Or Book I'm 40. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. We come down here into the onto the hydroelectric bridge dam that crosses the span of the Dnipro River and that creates the Dnipro Reservoir. This is located at Novokakhovka, one of the major supply routes for the Russians until the bridge was fully collapsed. Now, part of it has been reportedly filled in. However, it does not necessarily mean that this section of the bridge is is really capable of taking on heavy shipments and equipment, which limits their capability of resupply to the north side of the river. Most of the time right now, they're basing their resupply off of helicopter resupply, which is quickly becoming even more and more incapable as their defense systems are able to shoot those down relatively easily. And it makes it very vulnerable, as these things are generally unsupported and have to land in open fields in areas that are already considered very hostile terrain. And you're also talking about the fact that pontoons, once again, very limiting in their capability. Ukraine also tried to do the same thing with the Battle of Lysychansk. The Battle of Lysychansk ended about 3 days after that began. Once those bridges had been completely destroyed, they tried to ferry across equipment and troops and whatever have you, and it really did not go well. The battle did not last much longer as a result. Russians find themselves in exactly the same predicament here in Kherson, and as a result, the Russians have reportedly, according to President Zelensky, mined the dam of Novokakhovka with the intention, they have rigged it with explosives with the intention of destroying and breaching the dam, opening up the Dnipro Reservoir, and then sending that massive stream of water downstream, flooding the areas behind Russian forces as they retreat. That really is what we're seeing here, and so at least that is what President Zelensky is stating. Now, can we confirm this? No. But we do know that the Russians seem to have been planning this for some time, as we reported on the possibility ourselves of them destroying the dam, destroying the causeway, and destroying the Antonovsky Bridge if they should ever have to retreat. So the possibility has always been there, and it's something that we've always looked at and even had some photos to kind of point to this as well. Now, it would flood about 80 different settlements, including the capital, the regional capital of Kherson itself. This would be a massive war crime. It would kill and injure hundreds of individuals, mostly civilians, as the fact of the matter is that these people were hiding in their basements, subterranean levels. They're hiding in their basements to get away from shelling. And then a rush of water comes in. Not exactly a recipe for survival. But that's kind of the possibility that we're facing here. And it's something that, while I do not believe that the Russians will, they have yet to really destroy this kind of infrastructure in a massive enough scale to really cause severe issues. They hit the dam to the north, I believe, up by Kiev, but it busted one lock of it and it was quickly filled and didn't cause as bad flooding as suspected. But still, the possibility is there. And this is much more going to affect civilians than really have any significant military gain for the... Because it doesn't make sense for the Ukrainians to cross over the Dnipro River at all. There's really no point in Ukraine crossing over the Dnipro River from a tactical sense. Quote, this is coming from the press service of the main intelligence director of Ukraine Ministry of Defense. Quote, Russian and our occupiers mined the Kakhovka hydropower plant in April. They're currently working on mining locks and supports, as well as preparing a series of terrorist attacks on the right bank of the Kherson region. In particular, the Kakhovka Reservoir Dam and the Kakhovka Hydroelectric Power Plant Station aggregates are in danger of collapsing. Once again, we get this is coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on their official Twitter. Quote, Russian terrorists mined the dam and the units of the Kakhovka hydro power plant. If Russians terrorists blow it up, over 80 settlements, including Kherson, will be rapidly flooded. Hundreds of thousands of people may be affected. Bukim 40 says, doesn't it also affect Crimea water supply too? Not really. This dam here, I mean, it does, but it doesn't. This dam flows directly, so this river, the Dnipro, flows directly into the Black Sea. If you follow its path here, it flows directly into the Black Sea. So not really, because it then immediately turns into salt water once it gets into there. There are others that do affect it, this not really being one of them. The main thing with the Dnipro River is it's a major hurdle to cross. North of the Dnipro River, you see kind of the terrain we've been seeing for the majority of the war. Once you get south of the Dnipro River, into kind of this area north of Crimea, you see it turns into much more open and flat terrain that's not advantageous, and it makes it extremely difficult to maneuver and to defend. So it makes it difficult for both sides because they're equally as vulnerable and open, but Ukraine being much more garnered to a high-speed doctrine, high-speed mechanized warfare, and outmaneuvering their opponent as opposed to a defensive war, really leads them to really, as opposed to kind of Russian doctrine anyway, it really makes it more difficult for the Russians to defend this area because it's so open. But the Dnipro really only has two crossing points in this section, and that is Novokakhovka at the dam, and it's also across the Antonovsky Bridge. Both of them have been absolutely crippled at this point, and there's no really any good reason for Ukraine to cross the Dnipro River, because doing so really wouldn't be tactically advantageous, because Ukraine can use this along the Dnipro River to essentially set up a defensive line that requires minimal amounts of troops, because Russian incursions would be nearly impossible because of just the natural hurdle they'd have to go across. And that frees up a lot of troops on this side that can be then redirected to, say, Zaporizhia or over here into Donetsk or Luhansk to really wrap up those operations and basically close the door on the Russians, literally closing the door on the Russians all the way through Crimea, where they can bolster their forces, really get everyone together in one single spot, and then push through Crimea and over into the Kerch Bridge, while leaving other units in these areas for defense along the border. That's kind of how I see Ukraine playing out the rest of the war, and it's something I've been talking about for a little bit now. That seems like on the tactical level, with the brain I have, which is only tactical, I never had to worry about strategic. That seems like it seems like kind of the methodology there. Yes, John Collier says there's a canal from the dam lake to Crimea. So coming up from the reservoir, and there it is. Sweet. Okay. So yes. Well, I mean, would it affect Crimea? I mean, I guess technically, because it empties out the reservoir, which definitely does not help you if you don't have water access anymore in Crimea. But Crimea, the water access was already dammed up, so it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, like Ukraine already dammed it up, so yeah, it really doesn't affect Crimea. Are Russians seriously doing these boom booms? Yeah, they're probably going to. Yeah, That's 100% within Russian doctrine of doing this. Also, thank you for the advice there, Boomkim, Bookum. Really appreciate that. However, Hawaii 5-0 is not I was never interested in this show. Jump up here and into the Mykolaiv Oblast. We see that a Russian Su-25, which is a close air support aircraft, it's basically the Russian version of the A-10, but worse. But anyway, the quote: the armed forces of Ukraine shot down a Russian ground attack aircraft Su-25 on October 21st in the Mykolaiv region. That's coming from Vitaly Kim, the head of the Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration. Now, all of these point to the mobilization, the possible or the martial law, the evacuations of Kherson, the possible mining of the Novokakhovka Bridge, as well as the rumors that we're seeing, and the military pressure, and the fact that there's a media blackout, which usually comes with a lot of significant information afterwards, really leads us all to believe at this point the Russians are going to lose this region in days. I think it's measured in days at this point. Not so Google anymore. On okay terms and allowed water if Russia empties it, then even though Russia is in control of the dams, they do not have water to let through. Yeah, it's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, if you empty the reservoir, then you kind of screw Crimea anyway. But I have a feeling they're kind of preparing to possibly lose Crimea. I think that Russia may be looking long term at not being successful. Are days measured in hours still, or HIMARS? They're measured with every HIMARS rocket that successfully christens Russian ammunition depot with a smoking accident. Arch Instinct says, strategically, if the U.S. donated the USS Wisconsin to Ukraine's naval forces, the Black Sea Fleet would cease to exist. I really don't think so. I don't think so. Just because the USS Wisconsin. So there's a really big debate on battleships and if they have a purpose anymore. And that point got proven during World War II, when all of the battleships were essentially sunk or just had to participate in onshore bombardment because aircraft carriers really made them obsolete at that point. Battle wagons just weren't, ships of the line and battle wagons just weren't where it's at anymore. They have really impressive range, and it is really it's a prestige thing. It's more of a national prestige thing than it really is an effective weapon system anymore. That being said, I would love to call in 16-inch naval gunfire one time in my life, because that would be amazing. And I also want to be on deck at least one time and see or on deck of another adjacent ship to see a salvo of 16-inch guns. That would be amazing. I've been to the USS Iowa, which is amazing to say the least. And it is a really cool ship. I've been on board several warships at this point, but been on board the USS Iowa. It is very impressive, but the day of the battleship is over, unfortunately. I think there could be a purpose if used for shore bombardment under the proper circumstances, but that requires you to, take out really anything that can get, really any anti-ship missiles, anything that really can reach out and touch a battleship. You have to guard the battleship more than the battleship's worth guarding. And it's just not cost effective. The battleship is just too vulnerable in this day and age. And it would require extensive upgrades that make me question its viability anyway to bring them into action. The battleships are cool. I would love to see them used in like naval bombardment of a shoreline during an amphibious assault, because that's really what they're best at doing now. And it scared Iraq so bad that they purposely positioned their forces because they thought an assault was coming amphibiously, but just not really worth it anymore. Battleships just aren't worth it. So yeah, the Black Sea Fleet I don't think would cease to exist. I think the Black Sea Fleet would love the idea of sinking an American battleship, which is this huge prestige thing. You sunk one of the Iowa class battleships. Now, I could see if they had built the Montana class, because it has so much additional buoyancy, and so much additional weight that it could be played with without throwing it off keel essentially, and making it too top heavy. I can see where additional weapon systems would be viable and could possibly make the usage of a battleship viable, because it could carry drone systems on board deck and everything else, with a replacement of, say, like dual 5-inch gun turrets and stuff like that. But they never ended up building the Montana class. Instead, they ended up making more aircraft carriers because the war was over, and the battleships were useless at that point when they were commissioned in 1943. So the Iowa's not so much. They don't have the reserve of buoyancy to do anything. Over here in Mykolaiv, a Ukrainian official was actually arrested by the SBU, Security Services of Ukraine. The local official of the city of Mykolaiv was arrested by Ukrainian SBU during a meeting with the city mayor and other officials. Reportedly, the official, whose name was not disclosed, has been tracking and reporting the troop movements of Ukrainian forces within the Mykolaiv Oblast to Russian troops, as well as providing with targeting and artillery adjustment information for their strikes. We do have actually a video that was released by the SBU.
Доброго дня всім присутнім. Моє начальник слідчого відділу в Миколаївській області. Зараз тут буде, положіть, будь ласка, телефон, не чіпайте. Буде проходити слідча процесуальна дія в рамках відповідного кримінального провадження. По-перше, хочу попередити всіх про кримінальну відповідальність за розголошення даних досудового розслідування.
So that is the video released by the Ukrainian SBU on their official Twitter of the arrest of one of those officials in Mykolaiv. Is this real body armor? These guys? What these guys are wearing? Yeah, that's real body armor. there's different types of vests for different types of things. Like I carry like my plate carrier. I keep level 3A plates, which stop pretty much all handgun rounds. They're hard plates, but I also carry soft plates that will stop up to a 45 on the inside, and it also protects me from sparring. But I carry it in a combat load fashion, just because I have a system from my time in the Marine Corps that I am used to. You know, where my admin pouch is, where my tourniquet is, where my pouches for my magazines are. You know, how many magazines I plan on carrying. Just from my experience, everyone is a little different, and everyone has a setup that is catered to them, because your setup, your personal setup, should be set for you. It shouldn't be just a standardized thing. It should be whatever makes you as the shooter, as the individual, that much more effective. But it's also mission based. So I had times where I were swapping out certain things because I didn't need certain pouches on my flak or on my belt. Or, for instance, I don't see a time where I'm going to be where I would potentially become engaged by somebody using an AR-15 or something much more high-powered that would punch through a level 3A plate. I foresee my purpose of having that is to protect myself should somebody break into my home who's going to most likely be carrying a 9mm or 45 caliber handgun, which, in that case, my plates stop that and therefore protect me or whoever's wearing it should I not be home. And I can therefore re-engage my target because I also maintain a rifle in my house, which definitely will punch through a level 3A plate. But these guys might not necessarily, they don't have to have, there's certain flaks, they have side sappies. There are certain flaks that they don't even have the wraparound for the Kevlar. It's just the little straps, little bungee straps that are on the side to keep to you. Some of them are smaller. Some of them only carry front plates. Some of them don't. Well, some of them might not have a back to them to even be able to put a plate in. Yes, it is real body armor. There's different types of body armor. About the only not real body armor I see is coming from the Russians, who they literally just took sheet metal. I mean, like sheet metal you worked with in high school to learn how to do terrible, terrible welds, and they shoved it inside and then sewed it into a bunch of plates with like a bunch of foam and stuff to make it feel heavy and make them feel protected. I would much rather go into combat knowing I just don't have it than having something that doesn't work, because at least then I can make conscious, smart decisions about when I pop my head up and engage my target, because then I don't have a false sense of security that will get me killed. Fear is a powerful thing. It can work both for you and against you. But yes, to answer your question, yes, this is real body armor. Yes, those have real plates in them. You can very clearly see the outlines of the plates. No, they're probably not as heavy duty plates as, say, what the guys in the actual army are probably getting, because these guys probably don't need that kind of a style of setup. They have a completely different mission set. The guys they're taking care of probably aren't running around with a bunch of AKs. These guys are probably running around with handguns, if anything at all. Coming out of Odessa, we see the Grain Initiative update coming out today. As of October 20th, as part of the Grain Initiative, Ukraine has exported 8 million tons of agricultural products through the seaports of Odessa region. In particular, 2 more ships have left the Ukrainian port of Privdeni through the grain corridor today. 82,000 tons of Ukrainian agricultural products are on board and heading to countries in Europe and Asia. This is coming from the Ministry of Infrastructure. It's just, haha, the soldier would probably selling the plates anyway. Likely not. You probably wouldn't sell. Oh, you're talking about the Russian soldier. Yes, he would probably sell his plates. Severe hand injuries on infantry personnel are common. This is coming from JP Sarn, by the way. Severe hand injuries on infantry personnel are very common due to being so exposed. That is correct. So as someone, I operated in a CAP platoon, which stands for a Combined Anti-Armor Team. I operated in a CAP platoon, so I had to be a fully cross-trained machine gunner. And one of the things that was most common as an injury is definitely to your hands. Not just because they're so exposed, but it was a requirement for us to have gloves. We have to have gloves because barrels on machine guns get insanely hot and will burn the hell out of your hands. John Basilone from Suicide Charlie 1-7 during the Battle of Guadalcanal picked up a water-cooled 30 caliber machine gun with his bare hands and fought for the entirety of the night against an onslaught of Japanese forces on Guadalcanal, earning him the Medal of Honor, and burned his hands with third-degree burns that took him an extensive amount of recovery, and was one of the reasons he was actually rotated home. And so this is something that I come from the 7th Marine Regiment. I was in 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, so very similar lineage. I was in the 7th Marine Regiment too, and so something they really harped on for us was you have to have gloves, and I still maintain gloves all the time, just because it's smart to do so, even though you lose some dexterity. The best ones I can suggest, if you may be a Ukrainian soldier watching this, or if you are able to obtain these, or if you're just kind of interested in this stuff anyway, mechanics gloves are extremely good for what the price is. Monster Greg 11 says the saw or whatever. Yes, I have used every machine gun in the Marine Corps arsenal. I have been fully cross-trained on using the M249 saw or squad automatic weapon, the M240 Golf, the M240 Bravo, which are 7.62 by 5 1mm medium machine guns. I have been fully cross-trained to use the M2 HB or heavy barrel 50 caliber machine gun. The M2A1, the most modern variant, which was created by the Army, and it absolutely sucks because it has fixed headspace and timing. I also am fully cross-trained to use the Mark 19 40mm automatic grenade launcher, and I've also had a familiarization fire with the M134 minigun used by Special Operations Forces. I am the second best thing to a machine gunner. He says, I was going to agree 100% mechanics gloves rock. I used them for lifting. Yes, mechanics gloves are pretty awesome. I use a different kind of gloves. I think they're WX Coyotes. But, one second. Now I gotta go check. Sorry, I had to go grab my kit set up. So, so yes, I use WX Coyotes for my kit, for those that might be interested. The reason being is I like having my hands fully covered. And, put my gloves on here. So this is the WX Coyote, but the reason I like them is because of my knuckles. So something I hate is getting my knuckles tore up. And if I'm ever in a bad situation and I don't have time to like bust out brass knuckles that I don't own anyway, and so these, if you can hear that, they have inserts. So these actually have inserts in the glove that allows them to open up, or that you can actually put in, and they're really well made. I mean, they're little plastic inserts, but it keeps your knuckles getting busted up, because when you're racking a machine gun, you're racking it like this towards you, under grip style. But but these also work if you got to punch someone in the face. So that's my recommendation. That's why I like these. I don't like mechanics because they're rubber and rubber melts. I do have mechanics gloves, but they're not my preferred ones. Likewise, I know a lot of people who use like PMags for their rifles. PMags, I think, aren't the thing for me. I use So I use Stenag mags, the old metal Stenag mags, but I use tan followers because black and green followers, they dip in the front. These are supported along the whole route, but these slide out and they're better for speed reloads. You can wet and adjust your actual flak pouch for doing PMags, but I think they catch too much and I don't find that they seat as properly on the first try. So that's kind of my gripe about them. But that's kind of like my stuff, my personal stuff. Everyone's different. Same thing, like I have, same thing I like to have my tourniquet on my shoulder. Preferably I like to have it on my flak in its own pouch, but I like to have at least 4 tourniquets for myself so you can nugget me if need be. And then I also carry an admin pouch on the front that allows me to open it up and I can have small maps and stuff in there. And I always keep like I keep a stuff where I can call for fire and call 9 lines and everything else on the front of it. I have a little quick reference sheets that I can write on, just because it's better to take the 30 seconds it takes. And I always have an H&T gauge, headspace and timing gauge for a 50 cal. So this Monster Greg 11 says they probably pay you a hefty bit to train Ukrainian troops. I don't have any intention to go to Ukraine. Not because I don't support Ukraine or anything, but I have no intention of going back to war if I can't help it. If I get recalled, because I can still be recalled, I don't want to. But it's still a possibility for me. I still got time left on my contract to do so. If I can help it, I've seen enough of it. Any BARs left in still left in inventory? Haha, those things were badass. No, but I have seen 50 cals with wooden spade grips, which means that they're from World War II. Mechanics you can even get at Walmart, cheap and readily available. Yes, you should go and get, if you are a Ukrainian soldier and have the ability to, I highly recommend 10 out of 10 getting mechanics gloves. They're relatively cheap, but they're very good. And if you're worried about dexterity, cut the tips off of your fingers down to either the first or the second knuckle. Don't go past that, because you could lose your fingers should you catch shrapnel on it. Not that it would help if you had fabric anyway, but should you get a round explode in the chamber of your 50 cal or something, the likelihood is, because you're racking underneath, it protects your fingers instead of destroying the entire hand, which is one of the reasons why you do it. Also because you have better grip when racking the 50 cal this way. But get mechanics gloves, cut them to either the first or the second finger. That gives you still some dexterity, but it really doesn't matter, because when you're in a combat situation, your adrenaline is going to cause you to lose dexterity anyway. Because your blood's going to be pumping too much. So you're not going to be able to feel it. That's why you want to do big movements with everything, such as slapping when you go and slap your bolt release on your rifle. If you're using an AR variant, I know the AKs are a little bit different, but big movements are best. But no, they do not have BIRs left in the inventory. They just are so old. There's so much better stuff, man. Make sure you leave room for crayons in your vest. I always chow is continuous in the field. Let's see. Off topic. Should the military allow beards? I say yes. Have Finch limit full beards. No. They do allow beards, but it's operationally dependent, and you have to be special forces. That's kind of their thing. But I don't believe it makes for good military presence, and that's coming from a guy who's trying to grow a beard very unsuccessfully. Are flamethrowers outlawed by the Geneva Convention? Technically, no, as long as they're not used against personnel targets. So you hope we don't invade Iran or help the citizens install democracy. You don't want to be the vanguard guarding the future Toronto occupation embassy for days on end in an emergency while feet melt. Well, William, funny you should say that. So I was one of the 100 Marines that went to the Baghdad Embassy compound. I went to the Baghdad Embassy compound when 4,000 protesters breached the walls of the Baghdad Embassy on New Year's of 2020. Really didn't bother me to go there. I enjoyed my time. The people were very nice, very kind. The protesters screwed off, and then they shelled us for a month and a half straight with rockets. Here's the thing. I have experience that not necessarily a whole lot of people in the Marine Corps have in this day and age. Like, not people my age. Guys that are staff sergeants and gunnies and stuff in the Marine Corps went to Fallujah and went to Afghanistan. And they have experience of a different war than I did. I had a very different experience than they had, and I didn't have nearly as much experience. The fighting and stuff that we saw is not really anything compared to Fallujah. Like, you couldn't take what we did to shake a stick at Fallujah. Those guys had it very rough, and Afghanistan too. I look up to those guys with immense amounts of respect. Immense amount of respect. The guys that went into Sangin. Most of them, when I went through combat infantry school, my instructors were when I went to SOI, School of Infantry, my instructors were Sangin veterans. They were Marja Marines. And I had an immense amount of respect for them because they were teaching us stuff. They were getting ready to get out as I was coming in, and they taught us a lot of things that were extremely valuable that I wouldn't fully understand until much later on during my first deployment. And a lot of guys don't have that experience anymore. A lot of guys are doing, you're not going to Afghanistan, you're not going to Iraq, and you're not seeing active combat if you do. You're standing post. And when I went to Syria, I got a very different experience because the Islamic State had no problem shooting at us there. And neither did the Wagner group. So, it's a very different experience. A lot of guys are doing UDPs and MUs and stuff now. There's a very limited pool of experience at people at my level, corporals and sergeants that have that experience. So it's something that the Marine Corps is definitely interested in. I have no problem teaching a younger generation how to do their job. My gripe isn't with the fact of being a Marine or the danger of it. It's just I have had my taste of war, have no real interest in war is terrible. I don't think there's a brilliant person on the face of the earth that wants to see this war in Ukraine continue or any war happen to begin with. If you want wars to happen, you're a sick, twisted person that probably needs to go and find some help. Seriously. It's a terrible thing, but wars fought for right reasons are still important, which is why I support Ukraine. But I have no interest in seeing it again. I have no interest in seeing it again. I've seen enough. I've had my fill. I have problems still because of it. So that's my personal take on it. I just don't. But if my government calls me to go back, so be it. Just understand I'm not going to be happy with my chain of command probably. Because, man, they come up with some brilliant ideas I don't agree with. But anyway, that's all the... Oh, no, I almost lied there. We come into the Black Sea, where we talk about international incidents. A Russian missile was fired at or near a UK reconnaissance aircraft. A UK recon aircraft flying over international waters was intercepted by Russian fighter aircraft, which then fired a missile just outside visual range. The missile did not engage the aircraft, which immediately diverted its flight path back over NATO airspace. The British Defense Secretary, Ben Wallace, spoke with the Minister of Defense of Russia, Shoigu, and during the military investigation by the Russians, Shoigu admitted that the incident occurred over international waters and was the result of a technical malfunction on board the Su-27 fighter aircraft that resulted in the release of the missile. The United Kingdom has now resumed reconnaissance flights over the Black Sea's international waters. However, these flights are now being escorted by RAF fighter aircraft. Here is Ben Wallace addressing Parliament as to the incident, which took place on September the 29th.
An unarmed RAF RC-135 rivet joint, a civilian I-Star aircraft on routine patrol over the Black Sea, was interacted with by two Russian armed Su-27 fighter aircraft. It is not unusual for aircraft to be shadowed, and this day was no different. During that interaction, however, it transpired that one of the Su-27 aircraft released a missile in the vicinity of the RAF rivet joint beyond visual range. The total time of the interaction between the Russian aircraft and the rivet joint was approximately 90 minutes. The patrol completed and the aircraft returned to its base. In light of this potentially dangerous engagement, I've communicated my concerns directly to my Russian counterpart, Defense Minister Shoigu, and the Chief of Defense Staff in Moscow, and has done so. My colleague, the Chief of Defense Staff, has also communicated his concerns.
That was the report as given by Sky News there in the United Kingdom. And today, we see that it did, in fact, resume. This right here is another Boeing RC-135W rivet joint reconnaissance AWACS aircraft, which is being escorted by two Eurofighter Typhoon FGR-4s of the Royal Air Force. So it has two jets in a fighter escort there to escort this aircraft while it's on mission over the Black Sea. So they did resume, but the United Kingdom is basically telling Russia, fuck around and find out. I do not believe that another missile being launched while there's fighter aircraft nearby this thing will result in a very good international incident. I think that will result in an immediate response of an actual malfunction or not. Missiles are no good, and that may result in an actual missile that is actually good at what it does from a reliable airframe, immediately impacting an Su-27 in return. So, yeah, Russia, you're all right. It's balls in your court. See how much you want to find out. Anyway, that wraps everything up inside of the country of Ukraine. But don't worry, there's a ton of other news outside the country of Ukraine. And we actually start off here, just across the border here from Ukraine. This is over in Shebekino, which is in Belgorod, which is a large explosion which occurred near Shebekino, located in the Belgorod Oblast. It is from an unknown cause, of whether it was an accident or Russian forces, which Russian forces are pretty prone to, versus yet another strike on logistical infrastructure by Ukrainian forces, or it could, as some Russian sources are starting to report, it could have been an explosion at a paint factory, is what I'm seeing in some cases for this. Take a look here.
Тихо. Мандец, не свистит больше. Ух, ёб твою мать. Ёбуем. Уёбуем. Твою мать.
I see several photos coming out today. So that's happening. And then when you jump over here, this is in Nizhny Novgorod, where a tram caught fire from unknown circumstances. It's unknown what actually caused the blaze of the tram in downtown, and there haven't been any reports of casualties, but it's hard to imagine there aren't any. So that is the news coming out of Russia. So that allows us to get into the rest of Europe, which we actually start here. So there was a question here from Monster Greg who says, Belarus still trying to step? Yes. Yes, they are. In fact, so much so that Poland has deployed forces to the border. Poland, bordering the nation of Belarus, has been seen deploying troops to its borders with its unfriendly neighbor. Belarus, which has been supplying Russia with massive amounts of equipment, may become an active belligerent in the conflict in Ukraine and raising tensions on NATO's northern or eastern flank. They're not the only ones. Reportedly, Estonian and Lithuanian forces are also sitting here at the borders, here on this sector of the front. So they are going there to making sure Belarus doesn't try anything. So these are Polish troops headed to the border.
Каната подтягиваются до границы, подтягиваются, ребята, давайте подтягивайтесь. Ну, стоят с автоматами, танки, колонна. Не знаю, сколько километров, просто очень много, очень. Каната.
Yeah, so not a good idea to attempt anything there, Belarus. Over here in Austria, a 6-year-old is in rehabilitation. 6-year-old Alexandra Pascal lost her leg when Russia attacked Odessa in May. She got prosthetics and is currently undergoing a rehabilitation in the country of Austria. Take a look.
Mama.
Lookum40 says, I wouldn't F with Poland. No, I wouldn't. I've met the Poles, and they are pretty awesome, but they are absolutely insane. And they really, really don't like the Russians. Really don't like the Russians. Q Poland Wojak Article 5 meme. Yes. If there was one country I can see unilaterally entering the war against the Russians, it would be Poland. And that is the country I can see. The one country out of all countries in Europe, Poland, 100%, I can see them just one day going, you know what? Screw it. Let's go to war with Russia, and throwing in behind Ukraine. They're the one country in Europe that I can just see just deciding today's the day and just invading Belarus to get to the Russians. The Poles hate the Russians. And I think it's just a national thing. I understand why, because of the Soviet Union and the terrible thing so that they did to Poland. But I can immediately see Poland. That's the only country that I can see in Europe that would honestly go to war with Ukraine against Russia and Belarus. But they're awesome people. I made friends with some Poles when I was in Kuwait with crisis response. They're pretty awesome. And Poland would invade this actually brings up a good question. Arch Instinct asks, if Poland would invade Belarus and Russia, would they still be able to activate Article 5? No. If Poland unilaterally invaded another country, they would not be able to trigger Article 5 because Article 5 dictates that you have been attacked by another country, not that you are attacking another country. It's a completely defensive pact, and that is what NATO is. It also requires Poland to follow the United Nations charters, which is specifically outlined in the charter of NATO, that it cannot conflict with the UN charter. And Poland entering the war or beginning the invasion of Belarus or Russia would be an act of aggression by Belarus, which equally as so would have very bad taste for most of the international community. As warranted as it may be for Russia, Poland shouldn't invade another country. No one should invade someone else's country, which is kind of the whole thing that brought us to this point in history right now that we are sitting on. The precipice as we look at the fact that we live in the darkest timeline. And the fact is that don't invade other people. But Kralovac is Czechia. Yes. Kralovic is Czechia. For those that don't know, Kralovic, aka formerly known as Kaliningrad, is Czech. It is Czechia. Crimea is Ukraine. Kralovic is Czechia. And St. Petersburg, whatever this used to be, is finished. As we continue our tour of Europe, Ukrainian books were included in the Central Library of Frankfurt. The First Lady of Ukraine, Elena Zelenska, announced that Ukrainian classics and modern authors, artistic, historical, philosophical books, were transferred to the Central Library in Frankfurt am Main. You can see that announcement there. Of course, there's a big press thing. But yes, lots of Ukrainian books transferred there to Germany, which is fantastic to see. And we jump over here to London, where you may have already heard the news, but Liz Truss resigned as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Once again, the UK will be seeking out a new Prime Minister, as Liz Truss has officially resigned after only 44 days in office, making her time in office the shortest of any Prime Minister in United Kingdom history. Now, to be fair, Liz Truss was dealt a pretty bad set of cards. The United Kingdom is going through kind of a recession right now economically, and it has stagnated over some time. And she's also was thrown into the whole, the largest war in Europe thing happening. And then finally, the day after she meets the Queen as the official appointment of Prime Minister, the Queen died. So, yeah. I mean, well, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, it's, but, yeah, she got, Liz Truss got dealt a pretty bad set of cards. She didn't specify in her speech, or she doesn't specify in her speech really what the cause of her resignation truly is. A lot of people are saying it's economic issues with the country. A lot of it is pressure to resign as a part of it, but I don't know a lot about UK politics, and I also don't really want to dive into politics too much, because I want to stay apolitical with this channel, which is why I don't back either major party in the United States either. I don't back any parties in the United States. I just intend to report on what they say. So take that as you will. But this is Liz Truss. This is coming from GBN, I believe. Yes. And this is her statement at 10 Downing Street regarding her resignation. Take a look.
I came into office at a time of great economic and international instability. Families and businesses were worried about how to pay their bills. Putin's illegal war in Ukraine threatens the security of our whole continent, and our country has been held back for too long by low economic growth. I was elected by the Conservative Party with a mandate to change this. We delivered on energy bills and on cutting national insurance. And we set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. This will ensure that we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans and maintain our country's economic stability and national security. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
Now, traditionally, for a UK Prime Minister, until they choose the successor through that process that they have to do all over again, the same one that is how she became Prime Minister, she is supposed to stay out of the limelight, essentially, is stay out of the limelight, don't really you're just supposed to make sure everything doesn't collapse while you're there. Just keep things running as they were. Don't make any policy moves. Don't make any huge political appearances on TV or anything. Just do monotonous bureaucratic stuff. That's kind of like, and that's pretty much what you're supposed to do when you say, I will remain in the position of Prime Minister until you are, until they choose a successor. Is you're just the figurehead. Whoa. Did someone just say Boris Johnson? John Collier says Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson are both running as the replacement? Didn't Boris Johnson resigned, putting Liz Truss into this mess? And that's all I have to say. What do you think about today's news that the U.S. Navy talking about possibility of China invading Taiwan before the end of the year? Well, that brings us over into Southeast Asia, but I really don't have a whole lot in Southeast Asia. So I don't find it substantial. So I'm not seeing military reports from any of the major commands stating the possibility that China could invade Taiwan by the end of the year. Now, so for those that don't know, my older brother was in the Navy. He was an oceanographer and meteorologist for the U.S. Navy. He was stationed out of Naval Station Yokosuka, which is up here in Japan. It's just across the bay from Yokohama. And he provided oceanography and weather report and meteorological reports for carriers going through like the South China Sea, the East China Sea, Sea of Japan, and Philippine Sea, and the Taiwan Strait and stuff. And all the time, Taiwan and China says that they were going to invade Taiwan, like constantly. Even back then, keep in mind, this is 2004 and 2007. Some of my brothers told me when he came home on leave, because I asked him about what he did, is like, yeah, I give the weather report to the aircraft carriers because every time China says we're going to invade Taiwan, they say we're going to invade Taiwan with everything. Every warship, every fishing boat, every trawler, every tugboat, every rowboat. Damn it, if there's an inflatable flamingo, we will cross the Taiwan Strait and invade Taiwan with it. And they're serious about it too. Like, China hates Taiwan that much. It's an offense to their very existence. That's how Beijing sees Taiwan, because Taiwan is technically Chinese. They're the federal Chinese government, which is why it's the Republic of China versus the People's Republic of China. They both see themselves as China. It's just the island of Taiwan. It's the name of the island. I believe it's also known as the island of Formosa, which is prior to this. But so that's the thing with Taiwan. The thing with the Chinese Navy is that it is extremely low chance that they would actually attack Taiwan. The reason being is because it would bring the United States into war with China, which was a terrible idea for China. It would be costly for both sides, but it's a terrible idea for China. Who's one of the biggest buyers of Chinese goods in the world? The United States. What wins a war? Economies. China doesn't have it. If the United States ain't buying and the rest of the world is sanctioning the hell out of them, China's economy cannot take. It doesn't matter how big your army is. It cannot take. You have to have money. And secondly, the United States, while its surface fleet is smaller, China has the largest navy in the world. The United States Navy has more combat power versus the Chinese, which the Chinese are trying to make up for right now. That's why they're building a bunch of aircraft carriers. Most of their vessels are much smaller corvettes, like missile corvettes and stuff, while we're fielding actual frigates, like actual full-sized frigates and destroyers and larger vessels compared to the Chinese, which can actually operate in deep water ocean as opposed to very close to shore. And also, China has not built up a very large amphibious capability. The ability to conduct major amphibious operations is very unique to the United States, because the United States is about the only country that really had to do it consistently. Because the United States, in order to fight anywhere in the world, the United States quite literally has to pick up everything and transport it to the battlefield and supply those troops thousands of miles from the combat zone. That is something the United States has to do no matter where it finds itself in the world to fight. So the United States had to build up a rigorous logistical structure. And fighting island hopping campaigns and stuff, which is exactly what this would be, is something that the United States is already trained to do, has already done once successfully, and has developed the tactics to improve since then. You even see this in the Marine Corps 2030 doctrine, because the Pacific is the Marine Corps theater. It is the Marine Corps theater of war. I'm sure we can fight anywhere in the world, any climate and place, right? But the Pacific is where the U.S. Marine Corps is looking at right now. And that's why you see them dropping tanks. You see them decreasing tube artillery, but increasing HIMARS rocket artillery, which can hit vessels from onshore batteries. You see them lightening their payloads, improving the types of amphibious vehicles they're taking, replacing those aging AAV-8s, which are just the most god-awful amphibious death traps I've ever seen in my life. Tracks suck. And then they are... they're lightening up their load to make it better for ship-to-shore operations, amphibious operations against the defended beachhead. And so it's something that we're trained to do. China doesn't have that. Their Marine Corps is relatively small compared to the rest of the PLA. They do not maintain a large amount of really amphibious vehicles. In fact, and on top of that, Taiwan... There's only 2 times a year you can invade Taiwan, because that's the only times of year that that's the only times of year where I believe it's in the fall and it's in the spring, and it's because that's the only time the tides are favorable for an amphibious landing. There's a limited number of beachheads which you can actually utilize for an amphibious landing that are heavily defended, already have preset emplacements on them. And Taiwan is relatively small, which means that any systems they have can essentially cover the entire island in artillery. It's essentially the most fortified defensive structure in the world, and probably would not require a U.S. response for China to fail in an invasion of Taiwan, because it's so heavily defended. Their mountains are essentially hollow and are being used they can house their entire air force in mountainside bases and launch aircraft from them. It's insane. Taiwan is insane as a military structure. It would be, think of the Battle of Iwo Jima and how terrible that is. And Taiwan's been setting up their own Iwo Jima on their own island since the end of the Chinese Civil War. Decades, as opposed to weeks and months of preparation. That's not including mining the Taiwan Strait and everything else, because you can't just take a 1 million-man army, throw it into a bunch of boats, and just cross it like it's no tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. It takes logistics and it takes time. And yeah, so and Erebus says, yeah, the CCP just have endless and endless troops, which is fantastic, except they'd all get massacred. The issue isn't that the issue wouldn't be casualties for Taiwan. The issue would be I don't know if they have enough ammunition. They would run out of ammo before they ran out of targets. And that's kind of the only problem. It's not the fact that the Chinese army is effective. It's not the fact that anything is effective. No, there's just so many of them. They're not even that well equipped. Have you ever seen Chinese training videos of like them throwing potato mash or hand grenades and hitting the sandbag wall 3 feet in front of them? It's ridiculous. Hope the troops can swim then. Yeah, exactly. Like, they'd sink half the force before it got to Taiwan, and the next half of the force that got to Taiwan to hit these very heavily defended beaches that can actually conduct operations on would immediately become massacred on the beachheads by defensive emplacements which have been pre-positioned with interlocking fields of fire, and all the artillery on the island has had adequate time to pre-sight and have target reference points for every individual strategic point on these beachheads, meaning you could lay down precision, accurate artillery fire directly on top of troops bogged down on the beach. They literally have no place to go. It would literally be a meat grinder. So no, I have no... Even if Taiwan does somehow, some way, manage to invade or try to invade Taiwan by the end of the year, they would be annihilated. They would be annihilated. U.S. intervention or not, they would be annihilated. So then, how hilarious would it be memes being Xi pulls a Putin and orders the invasion anyway? Well, he would lose his government. That's probably going to happen. That would happen. Yeah, because, I mean, there's no... They have any instant tactics to mine the shore? They already have, yeah. If you look at Taiwan's entire, like, thought process is how do we protect ourselves when the invasion comes. It's not an if, it's a when the Chinese decide they finally want to invade us, how do we defend our island? Pulling a Churchill there. How do we defend our island? And their answer to that is building one of the best made industrial military complexes I have ever seen in a defense in depth. The Taiwan defense in depth, just reading about it, is insane. The best comparison is Iwo Jima. During World War II, Iwo Jima was in place. They dug holes. The whole thing was a giant fortress. How would Taiwan defend against the numerous CCP Air Force? Very easily. They have literal entire hangars built into the mountains where they can store, I believe, over half their Air Force, as well as most of their air defense systems, which are placed inside the mountains as well. That can therefore also, it provides natural shelter to them. It makes it extremely difficult to destroy them when any kind of an aerial bombardment, and they literally just continually get shot down out of the sky over Taiwan because what are you going to do? I mean, Taiwan is extremely mountainous. Plains, yeah, and Bookham 40 says planes don't hold terrain. That's another great point. Air supremacy really doesn't mean anything if the troops can't make it to their objectives, which they wouldn't. So I'm not, yeah. And I follow the Rock Marines too. They're insane. These guys are Taiwan is just an insane the idea of invading Taiwan should if anybody else could just look at Taiwan and understand that yes, tiny island versus giant China. Tiny island is the perfect fortress, which is why Taiwan hasn't been invaded yet in 80 years. It's just, Taiwan doesn't need U.S. assistance. Like, Taipei does not need U.S. assistance. They seriously do not. They easily can do it themselves. They do single-handedly can beat China in an invasion. They just don't have to go on the offense. Why waste the time, the effort, the money, and the lives going on the offense and retaking China for yourself as a federal party when you could just wait them out until they come to you and then just massacre their entire army, and then China collapses like the end of the Qing dynasty? I mean, why waste the resources? Just fight the defensive war. It's favorable to you. And Taiwan existing as an independent nation, which they are an independent nation, by the way. I don't care about the one China policy crap. Personally, like, they're an independent nation. Like, they're not the same thing. But the being an independent nation, that's an affront that's a heresy to China. But it's strategically placed so that China can never really extend its sphere of influence as long as Taiwan exists. So if they want to expand their sphere of influence over the rest of Asia and the Pacific, they have to take Taiwan. So which isn't going to happen because it tactically isn't feasible. It's not feasible for the Chinese based off of the statistical data. Now, we've seen where statistical data fucked up before, but based off of statistical data and seeing what the Chinese actually field, the Chinese field knockoffs of everything. Their 5th generation fighters are worse in some cases than our 4th generation fighters, and they're knockoffs of the F-35. They have knockoffs of the M16, which I believe they call the J-15. They have knockoffs of their main battle tank is a knockoff of the T-90. It's called the Type 85 TAC-3. Which, let's see here. Well, let's look it up, shall we? Alright, there's the T-90. Give me Type 85 TAC-3. Look at that, I already have it. So, let's see here. T-90 has support suspension, upper glacis, slope, lax, rolled steel, ceramic, laminate mix armor. T-90 is basically a late model T-72 chassis made with a late model T-80 turret. Cool. Well sloped front end PKT 762 machine gun with an anti-aircraft gun. Usually you can get 12.7mm or 14.5, as well as a 125mm main gun with a max effective range of 4,000 meters, as well as the ability to fire reflex and sphere ATGMs. It weighs about 45 tons. The Type 85-3, or Type 85 Tank 3, has a streamlined turret with the 7.62mm coaxial machine gun and a 12.7mm anti-aircraft gun. It has a 125mm smoothbore, similar to the main gun of the T-80 T-90, with a maximum effective range of 4,000 meters, with a concentric bore evacuator to the forward of the barrel center line. It has a sharp wedge shape in its upper glacis panel, or plate, and with a horizontal mud guard similar to that of the T-62. It has 6 large double sets of road wheels between the first and the third. Support suspension also uses a West German wavy style skirting. Can afford up to 5 meters for snorkeling gear, and has a crew of 3 with a maximum speed of 65 miles an hour. If I had to guess, I'm going to say that this thing can probably fire at about 8 rounds per minute, up 8 to 9 rounds per minute, with a, you can guess it, an automatic rotating, or with an automatic loader. Which, considering it has a crew of 3, same as the T-90, which also has a maximum speed of 65 kilometers an hour. And what's that? They both have a max speed of 65 miles an hour. This thing, the Type 85 TAC-3, can operate with a max range of 50 more kilometers, which you should never do. 41,000 kilograms. What do you weigh? Weighs 45 tons. So it weighs about the same. Fantastic. Used by China and Pakistan. So yeah, it's a knockoff T90. That's all the Type 85-3 is. It's a knockoff T90. And it's a knock, and a lot of things are, yes, they're just not good. I mean, everything they have is a knockoff as a military. It's stolen from someone else. They made their own Javelin because they saw how well it worked in Ukraine. They're like, damn, we need to get ourselves one of those. But it sucks. And about the only cool thing about it is it's reloadable. Do Chinese tanks have battle experience? No. Not really. They don't really have any major battle experience. Not in the modern day anymore. Missile and rocket forces are a Chinese strong point. Once again, China is a knockoff. China's a knockoff. China's if you took Russia and you actually made it kind of successful as a communist state, like semi-successful. Not that China's doing all so well right now, but they're knock off everything. They have a lot of troops, they have a lot of equipment, but it's all second. Like the Type 85 TAC-3 is considered second rate to the T-90, and we can see what the T-90 is like in combat because of Ukraine. Same layout, same everything almost. It has 50 kilometers more in range and is slightly lighter. That's really the big difference. And it has a slightly different armor design when it comes to the side skirts on it, which really won't do much against an ATGM. It won't do anything. And it's got a kind of a different forward glacis and forward gunmetal. It's a numbers thing for China, but their doctrine is, generally speaking, when it comes to artillery heavy, the same. But they're not really. The PLA just really isn't where it's at, and their aircraft really so Chinese fighters are not very good. Their 5th generation fighters, once again, are pretty much on the same level as our 4th generation fighters. They're knockoff F-35s, if you've ever seen them. I think it's called the JW-20. And they have their air-to-air missiles have longer range than ours, but they have worse guidance systems and they have worse electronic suites because they can't get the specialty parts that they need to have an extensive electronic suites in most of their equipment. Ironically enough, because that requires special parts from places like, I don't know, Taiwan and Japan. And, most other places that isn't willing to sell shit to China because China is an expansive military power similar to Japan prior to World War II, in the same way that Russia is being right now, in the same way that Iran has been for the last 30 years. So that's kind of where the Chinese fault is. They have a lot of stuff. It's okay stuff. It's not bad, but it's not great either. And when it goes up against another major military force, it's it's outclassed by whatever's going to go up against it. Doesn't mean the war wouldn't be costly, though. 100% it would be a huge costly war, just because numbers, as Stalin reportedly stated it, it's not even completely true. Quantity has a quality all of its own. Anyway, getting back into the actual news here. Sorry for the tidbit there. We jump over here and we actually end up in Iran, funny enough, where a Sunni cleric has blamed the supreme leader for bloodbath. Iran's top Sunni cleric, Maulavi Abdullah Hamid, has blamed Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, and other Iranian officials for killing of people of Zaydan's Bloody Friday, or September 30th. Dismissing the Islamic Republic's official account. He said that no one can evade responsibility for the carnage, with 90 people reportedly being killed on September 30th, when security forces opened fire on Zaydan protesters. Maulavi Abdul Hamid said, quote, the biggest demand of the victims' families and the people of Sistan and Balochistan province is that every single officer and agent who committed those murders be held accountable and all those who gave the orders be arrested. He also asked, why do you shoot people for 2 hours? If you want more, you can go there onto Iran International. And that brings us down here and into Africa, where we jump over to Ethiopia with some good news. Finally. Some kind of good news. Kinda. We're getting there. Out of Ethiopia, they're planning to attend peace talks on the 24th of this month. Quote, the Ethiopian National Security Advisor confirmed commitment to attend peace talks scheduled on the 24th of October of this year in South Africa after Ethiopian and Eritrean forces reportedly gained control over the airport in Tigray region, as well as Shire and Almada and Korem. The joint forces have reportedly captured warehouses belonging to NGOs or non-governmental organizations, and Eritrean forces are were reportedly looting vehicles. Civilians were reportedly killed in an aerial attack conducted in a residential area in the town of Adwa, Tigray. Coming from the Africa Report. If you want more information, you can go to Gorai TV, who's also covering that. We're here in Uganda. Districts in lockdown to control Ebola. Uganda's health ministry has reported 65 lab-confirmed Sudan strain Ebola infections and 27 deaths as of 10/20. Only one new case was reported on 10/20. 1,636 Ebola contacts are listed for follow-up. Mubende and Kasanda are under a 21-day lockdown to control the spread. The Ministry of Health has sent 10 minibuses to Mubende district to ease the movement of teachers and health workers. The government assessed that the epidemic is coming under control.
The minibuses that have been availed to Mubende district by the health ministry were offered by the World Health Organization. The move follows cries by teachers and health workers over their inability to access their places of work to continue offering critical health and education services.
Because there is inadequate staff quarters, we have inadequate staff quarters at our health facilities. So these 10 vans are going to be divided. Some of them will be taking the teachers, the other ones will be taking the health workers.
Apart from the minibuses, 4 ambulances out of the 10 that were promised have also been delivered to the district.
These ones are going to be helping us to take non-Ebola patients. Some go to Kampala, others come at the referral, but these ambulances are going to help a lot.
Whereas the movement challenges of health workers and teachers have been resolved, residents within Mubende are still grappling with the same problem. Many of them.
So that's just the follow-up report with that. Also coming from the Uganda Medical Center, or Media Center, regarding that official statement. Over here in the North Kivu province, 7 died at Allied Democratic Forces attack. The ADF, or Allied Democratic Forces, labeled as an affiliate of the Islamic State, raided Mobaya on 10/20 Thursday midnight. They targeted a healthcare facility and kidnapped a nurse. 7 were reportedly killed. And also coming out of the DRC, or the Democratic Republic of the Congo, coalition forces reportedly attacked rebel group in the DRC. The M23 Movement Directorate, a reported Rwandan-backed rebel group, stated that a coalition, including Congolese National Army, FDLR, Democratic Forces of the Liberation of Rwanda, amongst others, attacked their positions at Rangira on 10/20 at 3 p.m. local time. The Human Rights Watch reported on Tuesday the Congolese Army backed armed groups are implicated in a serious abuses of in conflict with M23 forces in the eastern DRC. For those that may not remember or may not know, the M23 group is if I'm not mistaken, is Tutsi. I believe they are considered Tutsi rebels. That goes back to the Rwandan genocide, I believe, 1994. They are, if I'm not mistaken, are the ones that actually shot down the president of Rwanda that directly led to the beginning of the genocide, not long afterwards. But, yes, that is the M23 rebel group. But that's been ongoing for decades now. That is, in this whole region, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Republic of the Congo, Central African Republic, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, this whole area is a hot mess of rebel organizations, ethnic cleansing, and a lot of, especially in the DRC, there's a lot of political instability. But these are areas of the world that just in the time frame of colonization just now really are not being colonies anymore, because you got to look at it. These countries gained their independence in the 40s and 50s, 60s, some of them, the 70s, becoming independent nations. They're very, very new nations, and there's a lot of political instability. They're much poorer nations. It's not like when the United States, won the American Revolution and were no longer, were no longer colonies, and they just kept everything. When the colonial powers inside of Africa left, they took everything with them. They made sure this region wouldn't survive, and they drew lines in a map, kind of whimsical. And it put a lot of ethnic groups together that didn't necessarily get along very well, which led to a lot of infighting. And certain groups, like the Rwandan genocide, one of the major gripes for the Hutu were the fact that the Hutu were the majority of the population, while the Tutsi, who were under the colonial powers, were the ones in charge, which is a minority of the population. When this was no longer a colonial power, I believe, of Belgium. They ended up, that's one of the reasons why, because they felt oppressed by the much smaller group of the Tutsis. And that's one of the reasons behind the Rwandan genocide of 1994, is because of the Tutsi being kept over from colonial power. And the M23 rebel group, if I'm not mistaken, is a Tutsi rebel group that shot down the president of Rwanda. And then that sparked the whole thing, because that's really the ignition point for that genocide. And that continues to this day with political instability throughout those regions. They were purposefully deprived by colonial powers. Basically, colonial powers went in. They said, okay, you want independence and we're breaking down colonies? Fantastic. Well, we built all this stuff and we paid for it all, so we're taking it with us. And they ripped up the railroads and all sorts. So it's, yeah, these countries were dealt a seriously bad card, and to begin with, and that doesn't help that it's not a developed region. Most of these economies are considered third world nations because they rely on basically a level 1 sector of the economy, which is mostly raw resources. They don't have a lot of manufacturing, which really brings you into a second world nation, which is where you see development and manufacturing, so producing things from raw materials. And the third world or first world nations are usually where 70% or more of your economic jobs are based in the service industry, things like working in Walmart or transportation or something else, service-based industry. So a lot of these are, I mean, they're third world countries. They don't, their main source of income is from raw resources with little to no manufacturing jobs and significant difficulties in providing basic services for a large part of their population, which stems economic growth from occurring. So that's kind of the situation here, as best as I can describe it in my understanding of it. But just think of how many good things would happen if this place became stable and people's lives improved. Like, that's billions of people. Like, that's billions of people right there that on the largest, one of the largest continents on the earth, that could be doctors and scientists and lawyers and philosophers and all sorts of other stuff. That all it would take is the opportunity that they just don't have now. Think of how much advancement we would have in technology if we almost doubled the amount of doctors that we had working and scientists working on problems of the world today. If these people had the opportunity. It's crazy to think about. But yeah. Jump over here in Haiti, where the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution addressing violence in Haiti. The UN Security Council adopted a resolution to target criminal actors in Haiti who have been undermining stability and expanding poverty. Sanctions includes targeted measures against gang leaders whose group is blocking the country's main fuel terminal. Haitians have been protesting against the U.S.-backed government for months due to inflation, food prices, and water shortage. When the Haitian government requested foreign aid, including troops, to tackle the groups blocking the fuel that has reportedly caused hiking prices, thousands of protesters against foreign interference and foreign troops. So it is not popular in Haiti. Foreign intervention is not a popular prospect in Haiti. The government is already having issues. The capital, Port-au-Prince, is completely surrounded by gangs, organized criminal gangs, that require that the United Nations World Food Program director there in Port-au-Prince, in order to get food to Port-au-Prince and then to other parts of the country, they have to take a ship because they can't travel on land because the gangs control all of the major roads in and around Port-au-Prince. Port-au-Prince is besieged by armed criminal groups. There's widespread violence and has caused a huge humanitarian crisis and innumerable amounts of suffering. I should probably actually show you this. So we're only going to watch about the first minute of this, but this is coming from AJ+.
Haitians are standing against their government and telling the U.S. to stay out of Haiti.
Non aux Canadiens, non aux Américains. Vous êtes des monstres. Vous n'avez pas de solution. C'est vous le chaos. C'est vous les crimes de gangstérisation qui a armé nos frères de les quartiers défavorisés.
On October 7th, Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry called for foreign intervention to fight gang violence. However, there's more to this story than the Prime Minister is letting on. Haitians have been protesting for months over inflation, food prices, and water shortages. But in September, Henry announced a plan to cut fuel subsidies that doubled the price of fuel on the island, which caused protests to escalate. One group even began blocking deliveries from Haiti's main fuel port in protest of the plan. Clearing this blockade is one of the main reasons for requesting foreign troops enter the country.
Quand c'est vous-même qui met problème yo, maintenant, on fin poser problème dans les coins et les recoins du pays, pendant que vous gangsteriser pays, on va massacrer moun, on va dilapider moun, on va dilapider caisse l'État, on va craser système des trois pouvoirs comme législatif, judiciaire et exécutif. Maintenant, même vous même encore pensez que c'est vous même encore qui solution, ou pour aller créer un pays impérialiste côté nous te calé, nous te dit jamais, Dessalines dit jamais plus que jamais, nous pas tourner dans sa nouvelle domination et je dis on mandé pour yo venir. Et comme c'est eux même qui solution. Et cependant, le sous-développement Elle est produit du capitalisme féroce.
Many Haitians see Henry as an illegitimate leader and have been calling for him to resign. In Haiti, the prime minister is appointed by the president. Former President Jovenel Moïse was fighting to stay in power when he appointed Henry. Days later, Moïse was assassinated. Since then, Henry, with the backing of the US and other foreign powers, has led Haiti with no interim president beside him. The US and Mexico are planning a UN resolution to authorize an international security mission that would allow foreign forces into Haiti. If forces are allowed to enter, this will be at least the 4th time Haiti is subject to foreign intervention. The US occupied Haiti between 1915 and 1934 and returned from 1994 to 2000. In 2004, the US came back again, followed by UN peacekeepers after the ousting of Haiti's president at the time. The UN mission stayed in Haiti until 2017 and has since faced numerous sexual misconduct allegations. Peacekeepers allegedly fathered and abandoned hundreds of children. Some mothers were as young as 11. Peacekeepers also introduced cholera disease to the island, causing a crisis that killed around 10,000 people.
Yeah, so the world has not been nice to Haiti. And keep in mind, this comes on top of the fact that Haiti is continuously hit by hurricanes, and it has earthquakes that level parts of the entire country, and it's just a terror. Like, living in Haiti is got to be one of the worst places in the world right now. Like, your house is leveled by an earthquake. You're then flooded by a hurricane and the storm surge that comes with it, or buried underneath a mudslide. You can't get fuel. You can't get food. You have cholera. The UN peacekeepers are sexually assaulting you. The United States continues to intervene in this thing. Gangs are massacring people in the streets. So if you survive all of this, you're probably going to get killed by a gang if you go anywhere near the outskirts of Port-au-Prince or anywhere else across the country. Life in Haiti sucks. I cannot understate that. The suffering is insurmountable. Like, it's insane to think about. And there's calls for another military intervention into Haiti. I'm not going to weigh in whether or not that's right or wrong. I think UN peacekeepers, but generally speaking, not UN peacekeepers from places that generally carry major diseases. I think countries like, I don't know, Germany or France or Canada or, I don't know, somebody else as a UN peacekeeping mission to Haiti would probably go well. I think that would, similar to that happened in Somalia in 1993. And with that, we get to finally wrap things up. We got 4 different points tonight for interesting and kind of uplifting news to end the night. So we understand this is kind of dreary. Trust me, it's very dreary and usually very gory too. We try and wrap up the night on a good note or an interesting note with something a little bit lighthearted. You know, try and end the day on a good piece because it is kind of depressing sitting here listening to all the suffering ongoing throughout the world, point after point after point. And so we start off over, well, we're going to go over here. We're going to go into Iraq, and specifically over here into Mosul, where we get to the Moscow Gate. Now, the Moscow Gate was destroyed by the Islamic State, but there have been 2,700-year-old rock carvings uncovered by a joint U.S.-Iraqi excavation team of archaeologists when they completed the reconstruction work on the Moscow Gate. They uncovered Assyrian rock carvings dating back to 700 BC.
The plaque reads 60.
This is Al Jazeera, by the way.
In 60, the year when the Wazir Mosque was built. but this is all that's left of it. The cracks in the arches and fading tiles are reminders of the golden days of Baghdad. This is the Victorian facade of the Iraqi capital's old governorate building. It was damaged during the 2003 US invasion and has been abandoned since. This area was part of the Ottoman military complex on the banks of the Tigris River. Its decrepit state symbolizes the neglect of Iraq's rich cultural heritage.
Many people nowadays are not aware of the importance of these sites. Another reason is that recently Iraq has faced violence and internal fighting, which led to a weak government.
The Kufic inscriptions on Baghdad's old minaret are fading. The Caliph's mosque compound is over 1,000 years old, built by the Abbasid caliphs. After centuries of wars and invasions, the minaret is the only original structure left. And it didn't always lean. The government has sealed the mosque because of the dangerously rapid tilting of the minaret, but there are no real efforts being made to repair it. The government's priorities are the provision of basic services, and with a struggling economy, preservation efforts inevitably take a back seat.
There are no worshippers in this mosque compound, which is hundreds of years old, because of the fear that the minaret could fall on the hall. These days, when people pray, they do it in the courtyard.
Spiderwebs have replaced the curtains inside. And we're told there are no books left in the library upstairs.
We need to value these sites, not only the religious ones, but also historic sites like the Assyrian and Babylonian sites. It would help to strengthen the national identity.
And that Iraqi national identity has been blurred by years of sectarian strife, corruption, and mismanagement. These two domes envelop the symbolic eternal flame of the Iraqi flag. This monument, built in the 1980s, used to represent fallen Iraqis. Now many government departments claim ownership of the multi-million-dollar landmark. The Martyrs Monument was used by US forces and then the Iraqi military as a base. Like much else of Iraq's heritage, its museum and library were also looted. These days the halls remain empty and the general public is not allowed in. Baghdad's rich tapestry of ancient and modern history is fading fast. Many people are afraid that unless action is taken to protect and preserve it, it could be lost forever. Osama.
That minaret's over 1,000 years old. And if you've ever been to like Mosul and you've been to Baghdad, as I know some people that watch this have been, you can understand that. One of the that was one of the cool things to me of going to Baghdad, is because from parts of the U.S. Embassy. So this is the U.S. Embassy complex down here. This is the U.S. Embassy complex in Baghdad. That's the Tigris River. I have photos of me, standing post over the looking over the Tigris River and looking down towards 14th July Bridge and seeing, the minarets that are around Baghdad, and you can see the cross scimitars that are down here, the victory arches that are so famous for when, U.S. tanks ended up rolling down these things, when they got into Baghdad, and all those famous photos, and the Grand Square, the Unknown Soldiers Monument, all this rich heritage. Baghdad is one of the most influential places in the world when it comes to culturally speaking. This is Mesopotamia. This is the founding of basic civilization. This right here, the confluence in which both the Tigris and the Euphrates River meet. That would be right here. That would be Baghdad. That is Mesopotamia. Which is amazing to think about. And there's so much rich history here. And because of instability politically, because of wars that have been fought for not just the invasion of Iraq or the Iran-Iraq War or the Gulf War or any of that, but thousands of years of fighting, hundreds of years in recent history of fighting, of multiple wars and occupations and political turmoil and instability, the fall of the Ottoman Empire, colonialism. A lot of these sites just go just, they aren't preserved, and in some cases, as we saw in Mosul, they're destroyed by certain groups that see it as an affront to their extremist ideologies, such as the Islamic State. But Baghdad House of Wisdom is a perfect example. I don't even believe that it exists anymore, but there's a lot of rich history, even in recent times, also known as the Islamic Renaissance. So always good to keep that in mind. We may think of right now Syria and Iraq, and a lot of these regions are known for their extremism and instability, but there's a lot more to these regions, and the people there really aren't that bad. Kurdish, Arab, it doesn't matter. People there are really awesome. I really like them, and it would be a beautiful place to visit. It really would. Where I was at in Shaddadi, and up in Al-Hasaka province, this would be a beautiful place to go and visit, and a fascinating place to go visit. Unfortunately, the security situation there just doesn't allow it. It's really sad to see that people just can't get along, and that extremist ideologies seem to flourish there. And there's so much political turmoil, and a lot of it's religion-based, unfortunately, too. But they're wonderful people no matter where you go if you talk to them as individuals. But it's, it's really sad. It would be a lot better if people would just stop killing each other. It really would. Down here in Colombia, yesterday was the International Sloth Day. International Sloth Day was created by the foundation of the AIUNAU, which as a compromise acquired on the first Sloth International meeting about the well-being and conservation of sloths held in Medellin, Colombia in November of 2010. International Sloth Day was created as a necessity to bring the world of sloths and their habitat to everyday people and raise awareness towards the other living beings of our environment. These things are adorable. San Diego, California. I've heard they stink, though. But these are the really slow, sleepy things that everyone likes to make fun of. But they can be very adorable when they're active. And it's coming from the Philly Zoo. Animal Planet, of course, got an amazing shot. Animal conservation is extremely important. It really is, because you really don't realize just how important. Like, no one likes bats, right? No one likes bats, but they're extremely important for your environment and the habitat, your ecosystem, and these things are no different. Every living creature on this earth plays a part in some way, shape, or form to making things habitable for us, and for everything else. It doesn't take much to really affect it. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about all these cute animals. And now we get some space stuff. We'll go over here in Hawaii. We'll see what this is the multi-wavelength view of the turbulent stellar nursery. The lives of newborn stars are tumultuous, or tempestuous. as this image of the Herbig-Haro objects, HH1 and HH2, from the NASA ESA Hubble Space Telescope depict. Both objects are in constellation Orion and lie around 1,250 light years from Earth. HH1 is a luminous cloud above a bright star in the upper right of this image, and HH2 is the cloud in the bottom left. So this is coming from the Hubble Space Telescope. Now that is a very beautiful image. If that's what I got to look at whenever I went to work, A-okay with me. It looks like a Renaissance painting. Doesn't that blow your mind a little bit? Looks like the Renaissance painting or the inside of a geocrystal. I mean, it just blows my mind just quite how eerie but beautiful our universe really is. And we continue that theme as we jump over here into the Goddard NASA Space Flight Center, where we get these fresh pictures of the populations of forming stars seen by the James Webb Space Telescope. It's captured a lush, highly detailed landscape of the iconic pillars of creation, where new stars are forming within dense clouds of gas and dust. These three-dimensional pillars look like majestic rock formations, but are far more permeable, and these columns are made up of a cool interstellar gas and dust that appear, at times, semi-transparent in near-infrared light. So those are the pillars of creation. One of the last groups of dense star formation in the world, or in the universe. In fact, we as human beings, it's something I learned actually from another channel, KHERSON's Art, or In a Nutshell, which is amazing. I highly recommend you go and check them out. But according to scientists, we are at the end of star formation. We are seeing for every year that thousands of stars are burning out, and about 3 on average are created. Sorry. Every day, thousands are burning out, and about 3 are created. So we're at the end of the star formation period of our universe, as far as we understand it now. But this is really beautiful. It's really cool. It's absolutely fascinating, some of the things that are in our universe that you just don't ever think about. I highly recommend, if anyone ever gets the opportunity, go out into the mountains and go on a camping trip. Up in the mountains, far away from people. Well, if you live in the United States, Colorado is fantastic for this. I highly recommend going to the San Juan mountain range in Colorado, up by Mount Sneffels. Take a nice hike up to Blaine Basin, which is on your way up to Mount Sneffels, and set up a camp there for at least a night up in Blaine Basin, and you will have a breathtaking experience that night when it comes to stargazing. And if you are living further out west in, say, California, I highly recommend at least one time go out to Amboy Crater for a nice clear night, and go out to Amboy Crater and watch the stars from there, and you will get to see the Milky Way. You'll get to see the rest of the Milky Way from there. You'll get to see all sorts. It's absolutely amazing. Middle of nowhere, no real light pollution, and it makes for it. A lot of people don't truly understand just how breathtaking it really can be. Because, like light pollution from towns and cities and cars and stuff really dampens just how much you can see out there. And it is very beautiful if you ever get the chance. Or if you can get your hands on some night vision goggles, even better, because that amplifies ambient light. And you can stare up in the middle of nowhere in the desert and stare up at the light and you can see all of the stars. It's just amazing. Our universe is crazy to think about. But that is actually it for tonight when it comes to the news. I've gotten off topic quite a few times tonight and talked a lot about a lot of things. But I hope you at least found maybe it interesting or knowledgeable. And of course, I always encourage you to do your own research if you find any of this stuff interesting or if you want to learn more about it. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I hope that you have had a wonderful night, and I hope that you guys have become a little bit more aware of what's happening in the world around you, especially when it comes to stuff like Ukraine and Ethiopia and places where things just aren't going so well right now. But the whole point of this organization, or the whole point of this channel and the new news team and everything else, is to bring awareness to you and to be the news that gives back. So please check out the video description below. Please give your support to the wonderful organizations down there. And please go ahead and give as much support as you can to them. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. One of the biggest things you can do for us is to help us grow our impact by helping us grow our channel. The more people that come here and watch the news, the more good we'll be able to do overall. So please, if you can, give us a like, give us a subscribe, hit those notification bells, share us amongst your communities that you may be part of elsewhere, and hopefully we'll get a lot more people here and be able to really start doing fundraising on every single stream. We want to be able at some point to attach fundraisers to every single stream we do. But tomorrow night we will be going, or tomorrow we will be live once again for 24 hours of news and review at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central, for the next 24 hours worth of news ongoing throughout the world. So that way some of our viewers that are in other parts of the world can also join in that may not normally be able to. And so with that, my name is Paul from the New News. I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. And if not, I do hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. Hopefully we will see you tomorrow once again, and have a fantastic rest of your night and a wonderful Saturday. Bye now.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно в лавахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуємо. Тут для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно в лавахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно в лавахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your number 11, shove it up your wrinkled butt. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно в лавахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно в лавахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно в лавахи, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно
нахуй!